Order! Order! You are an incorrigible delinquent at times. Behave yourself, man!
I've been going out with a girl, her name is Julie, but last night she said to me when we were watching telly.
Should Britain have a second EU referendum? I'm asking in a different way. Should the people of Britain have a say over Theresa May's deal that she brings back after negotiations conclude? Mike from Southampton, tell us what you think.
Good morning, Maajid.
Morning.
I promised myself I wasn't going to get involved in this, but when that bloke from Trowbridge called in, I couldn't resist it.
It's like an addiction, isn't it?
First of all,
My name is Mike and I'm an alcoholic.
yeah. First of all, he said there's 17.4 million different opinions of leavers. There is not. There was very basic and very, very clear indications of what we were asking for when we left. But nevertheless, if we're going to have another vote like this people's vote that people want to do, why is it such a binary choice that accepts the condition or we remain in the European Union? That decision has already been made. Despite what George Soros wants to do with his money, we've already made that decision. Even if it goes to Parliament, because that's the next question you're going to ask me, put it to Parliament, but the choice is accept the deal or go back to the European Union and tell them to start again.
All right, I see. So the second vote, the terms for you... Yeah. So hold on, Mike, let me just clarify your view. The terms for you should be either we accept the deal Theresa May brings back or we go back to renegotiate where we don't like the terms. How long does that continue for in your view, Mike?
I don't know. We do it once more, and then if after that we say, forget it, European Union, you're obviously not negotiating in good faith, you're all crooks, we're leaving anyway on whatever deal we can.
But Mike, that brings me back to my chat with Vicky, which I don't want to repeat again. Please don't make me go around in circles. No matter what scenario you imagine in your mind, walking away on a no-deal basis is never the end result. It's only another tactic to try and arrive at another deal, right? And so ultimately, we still will end up at a deal, and the question still applies. Should Britain have a say over the deal that we end up with?
Well, you can go round and round in circles then, but yes, we should have a say, but the question needs to be phrased in the way that we've already accepted we're leaving. So the answer is, if they still won't accept it on a second...
So we keep going back and forth like that, playing ping-pong. How long does that carry on for?
No, then we go back out on WTO rules and we let the world markets govern what happens.
The WTO rules don't solve our Northern Ireland problem, Mike.
There is no problem in Northern Ireland. You don't have to have a border between Northern Ireland...
Mike,
construct.
Years of terrorism tell us there's a problem in Northern Ireland.
Rubbish.
There was no terrorism.
As a threat. So there's a whole bunch of old has-beens IRA terrorists that are just waiting with their guns to start again. If there's any sort of...
Isn't that a problem?
On a border.
Isn't that a problem?
No, it's not going to happen.
What's not going to happen?
There's not a whole bunch of old IRA terrorists waiting with their guns to start a war again.
No, Mike, I'm saying there's a problem there, though, isn't there? The Stormont Assembly's broken apart, hasn't sat for months, right? And the peace process is contingent. It's contingent on having a situation with a relationship with the European Union. And so at the end of the day, there has to be a negotiated settlement. Whether you like it or not, there is a problem in Northern Ireland, and the WTA rules won't solve it.
There is no problem in Northern Ireland. That's been made up. If you recall,
Mike?
This is a different phone-in.
Mike!
Martin McGuinness, if you recall, he knew he was dying, and he used his death to bring about a constitutional crisis in Northern Ireland.
Mike.
He made it sound like he had to leave. He was leaving anyway because that was predetermined.
All right, so according to your solution, we say, all right, we're going back to WTO rules, right? And then somebody from the Republic of Ireland wants to step across into Ulster. What do WTO rules say about that?
Well, they already step across into Ulster.
Right, so we still have freedom of movement between the EU and Britain after we leave?
We have freedom of movement across the British Isles, which includes Southern Ireland. We've had it since 1920 under the...
But Mike, I don't think you're understanding. The Republic of Ireland allows somebody to step from France into its territory, and if that French person then goes from the Republic of Ireland into Ulster, it's then in United Kingdom territory. should that scenario continue to happen? What do the WTO rules say about that?
The Republic of Ireland is not in Schengen, and therefore anybody coming in from France, Germany, or any of the other Schengen countries can be recorded and will know where they're going.
Well, no, they're stepping into the Republic. The Republic does what it wants. Do we need to know what the Republic's doing?
No, the Republic of Ireland doesn't do what it wants. It's doing what it's told by Michel Barnier and the rest of the crooks.
But that's my point, Mike. Mike, hold on a minute. You're saying we go to WTO rules. What do WTO rules say about the Republic of Ireland remaining a member of the EU and allowing for free movement from the EU into the Republic if the border remains open with Northern Ireland? That means free movement remains in the United Kingdom as well. What do the WTO rules say about that scenario?
WTO rules say nothing about that. You know very well about that.
Well, then how can we revert to WTO rules without a deal?
We can revert to WTO rules on trade, and if people want to wander across the border, they're not hardly going to come across in the hundreds of thousands, are they?
Well, if that's the Achilles heel, the only place from which you can enter into the United Kingdom via the EU, I suggest to you they will continue entering the UK through the Republic of Ireland.
No, it won't happen. I just don't think it'll happen. It's being raised as a
okay, Mike, you're worried about Polish and Romanian and so on and so forth migration from the EU into Britain, and you want to shut that door, but you're going to leave the door open in Northern Ireland, and you're telling me that the very thing you're worried about won't continue to happen.
Did I tell you I was worried about Romanian and Polish immigrants? I don't think I did.
So you're fine with free movement?
I'm fine with relative free movement as long as...
No, free movement, because the Republic of Ireland will continue to have free movement with the EU.
Because at the moment you have free movement of criminals, of...
Yeah, but Mike, whatever you have at the moment, the Republic will continue to have that scenario. And so if you don't shut the door on Northern Ireland, they will enter Britain through Northern Ireland.
And I still contend they will not come across in their hordes like they are now.
Well, if you've left the door open, why wouldn't they?
Well, because perhaps they'll want to go and stay in Ireland.
Mike, listen to yourself. Please listen to yourself. You sound like somebody who's saying, a robber's going to come through my front door, so I'm going to bolt the front door and leave the back door open, and the robber won't come through. That's the kind of logic you're using, Mike.
Problem. If you're saying that's a problem, let's put a border up between Northern Ireland and Southern Ireland.
Which is not what the WTO says. I mean, you can suggest that, but if you suggest that, Mike, then that isn't a no deal. That's us saying, okay, one of the things we're going to do if we don't like the terms of the deal that Theresa May brings back is we're just going to erect a hard border between Northern Ireland and the Republic. If you do that, then what happens to the peace process?
Why is the peace process governed by a no border?
Because that was part of the terms of the deal with the Sinn Féin.
Yeah, and I think you'll find that it also says subject to any future changes. So the future change has happened, that we have elected to leave the European Union. Ireland has elected to stay in the European Union because they had a second referendum because they were told to. And if that means a hard border, then it's their fault, not ours.
And just to hell with the peace process in Northern Ireland, yeah?
No, not to hell with the peace process. We put a border up, and if Sinn Féin decides they yet again want to play silly buggers, then we'll have to go after them.
Go after them. Well, there we have it, folks. That's the solution. Go after people with whom we break the terms of a Good Friday deal with. And if they don't like it, we'll just go after them.
Jazz in Crawley, hello.
Hi, Sheila. Regular contributor to... Russian propaganda news.
Okay. And Ukrainian now.
Yeah, and Ukraine also. I was just saying to a researcher, the last time I bought a newspaper was September the 12th, just after the buildings came down, because of the amount of fake news that was at that time surrounding September the 11th. And I don't think it's improved, and I certainly believe that journalism has been compromised by this fake news because, you know, with the advent of the internet, YouTube and everything else like that, people research a hell of a lot, make their own YouTube videos on these kind of so-called fake news to try and bring out the truth. And we have got to try and bring out the truth no matter what as journalists. It's imperative, you know, and it's imperative also to call out anybody that's doing fake news. You know, I don't know what else to say. It's kind of mind-boggling because I search the internet 24 hours a day. Well, not 24 hours a day, but as much as I can for real news, for proper news.
And how do you decide what's real and proper?
I guess you've got to go on a gut feeling on it, and not to actually take the whole article as the truth, is to, you know, try and take snippets of it which you kind of believe. I'll give you an example about the skip holes. There wasn't any evidence, any detail, but there was a lot of conjecture about, you know, what had actually gone on.
Well, hang on a sec. Okay, let's dig down. Okay, let me dig down into that statement a little. Just 2 days ago, we had the medical staff at the hospital in Salisbury that treated them talking about the case. Now, unless they are very good actors and actresses and part of a massive MI5 plot to create a fake attempted assassination on the streets of Salisbury, and the same would apply to the witnesses who waded in and helped them and called 999 when they were first found on that bench in a distressed state and a semi-conscious state. Unless all of those people are really good actors, I'm prepared to accept that the medical staff at Salisbury really have been treating people for the condition that they tell me they've been treating those people for. Are you?
Well, perhaps so, but then I would like to ask, why is the medical profession actually putting themselves out to clarify this? Because it doesn't appear that they do it all the time.
But they often do it well. They often do it after big terrorist attacks or shootings. And in America, you see it quite a lot. The medical team that saved people will talk about the injuries and talk about what their team faced. You saw it with the Manchester arena bombing. It's become, I understand your question, but it has become quite usual. And I don't think it's any bad thing because, you know, we do want information.
But isn't this down to the journalists to give us this kind of thing, not to rely on doctors and nurses who should be treating people, not...
But it doesn't stop. It doesn't stop what journalists also do, does it? It doesn't stop journalists from also speaking and searching and asking questions. It's just a layer of information that we can decide for ourselves whether we believe or not.
Absolutely, and that's exactly what we've got to do, is train ourselves to... search the internet to look for real news and to hold journalists accountable for fake news, I believe.
Do you have confidence in... Well, you tell me what you have confidence in, Jez, when you read and watch and listen.
I don't have much confidence in the BBC, say.
Why?
I kind of think that a lot of BBC articles have got an agenda behind it. It's not just, here's the news, this is what it is. It's kind of salacious and sometimes impartial, and it's more about feeling nowadays than fact.
Well, I think that's probably unfair on the BBC. I mean, I worked there for 25 years and I saw excellent journalism and I saw examples of bad journalism, but when it was bad, it was mainly just lazy rather than actively trying to deceive anyone. But I have to tell you, in every newsroom I ever worked in, the word impartiality was said on a daily basis, and there were questions asked, there were conversations about the tone of pieces, making sure that people were properly represented, that things were balanced. And again, it's an imperfect process, but it's a damn sight better than a lot of the stuff you see around the world.
I agree with a part of that, Sheila. Not all of the BBC. Some of the BBC is very good. But a lot of it, well, I'm afraid I can't really go with it. And
what is it about, that's enough of the BBC, what is it about LBC that gives you confidence?
Doesn't give me much confidence because...
well, you called us.
Well, actually, I'm really grateful for the opportunity to be coming on to LBC, because you do have me on quite regularly on there, and that I'm quite surprised about. But I must say I do.
Why are you surprised about it?
Because sometimes I do ring up and I do scream and shout and you don't let me on, but then when you do let me on, I do make my points, and I'm quite happy about that.
Oh, you shouldn't scream and shout though.
I know I shouldn't.
That won't help any of us. We all want to sometimes. We all want to scream and shout. I want to scream and shout quite a lot, but it doesn't help very much. Jazz, thank you very much for your call. Jazz in Crawley in West Sussex.
We're not supposed to believe everything that we read in the press. Then you've got to start with the premise that it's all fake news. And then you allow us to make up our own opinions.
No, I don't subscribe to that, because I think that
Iain,
Well, Andrew, if we're going to have a conversation, you have to let me speak occasionally.
You just said that you had the same premise as my father taught me, which was don't believe
Yeah,
everything you read in the
because
paper.
you have a...
If you pick up a
Oh, for
newspaper
goodness sake, would you like to let me engage in this conversation, or do you just want to have a monologue?
Story.
Oh, my goodness.
They don't tell you which is a true story.
Right, are you going to stop talking?
Yes, no, I'll listen to you.
Good.
I'll listen to you all in the afternoon anyway.
Well, I'm very glad. But if a conversation means a dialogue between two people, not someone just going on and on and on to exclude the other person from the conversation. Here we go again. Dear, oh dear. Do you know, Andrew? I'm just going to cut you off in a minute, because I'm fed up. If we're not going to have a conversation, fine. But I'm perfectly prepared to have a conversation with you if you'll let me.
So am I.
Okay?
Yep.
I don't hide where my political views come from. The whole premise of this radio station is that the presenters are allowed to offer their opinions. And we then rely on you, the listener, to make up your own mind on what we're saying, whether you agree with us or whether you don't agree with us. And I always say I much prefer having callers who disagree with me, because that actually makes for a much better conversation. I think people learn more from it. And I learn from it as well. Sometimes I'll start off with a view on a subject at the beginning of the hour, and then at the end of the hour, I might have a very different view. And that has happened on probably more occasions than I would like to admit. I don't have a right-wing agenda to push, but I have my beliefs, which I will lay out for people to agree or disagree with. What's wrong with that?
Oh, no, I'm not saying there's anything wrong with that, but what I'm saying is your argument is that one of the things that you said was that you worked on the same premise as what my father said. Don't believe everything you read in the press. But if you pick a newspaper up, try and find me anywhere within the article that says, oh, by the way, we made this story up. They don't. So
well, what journalist is ever going to admit that they've made a story up?
You've got to start with the premise that it's all fake.
Andrew, what you do is, if you think that a journalist has made a story up, then you read around it. You go to other sources to check it out. Yes. And if you come to the conclusion that it's made up, then you complain to the editor.
Well, but Iain, you're saying that to read round the subject, we are told to avoid sites where, in inverted commas, they are pushing fake news or conspiracy.
Well, I have come to the conclusion that Russia Today is a propaganda channel, so I don't bother watching it. Now, you might think differently. That's you're entitled to.
Stop watching the BBC and stop watching ITN and stop watching Sky, because they're all propaganda channels.
No, they're not.
Yes, they are. They're pushing their own agendas.
Well, what agendas are those?
Well, they're only feeding us information that they want us to have. It's as simple as that.
All news is subjective in a way, because, I mean, all newsreaders, if they write their own news bulletins, of course it's subjective, because they're choosing which stories to cover in the news bulletin. So I'll go along with you as far as that goes. But if you're saying to me that the BBC or Sky have a particular agenda that they push to the exclusion of everything else, I'd love to know what that agenda is.
So would I. But
well, if you can't tell me what it is, how can you accuse them of having one?
Right. So let me give you an example. Well, there's a whole lot of atrocity going on in Somalia. There's a whole lot of atrocity going on in the Yemen, and yet we don't cover stories like that.
Yes, we do. I covered the Somalia story the other day on CNN. So we've covered the Yemen.
BBC. I said BBC and Sky. I didn't say you.
Well, I've seen stories on both of those on BBC and Sky.
Not on mainstream news, there aren't.
Yes, there are.
I watch the news at 10 o'clock. Every single
and you've
day.
never seen anything about Yemen on the 10 o'clock news?
No, I didn't say that. Not recently. Not recently, I haven't. No.
Well, maybe there hasn't been a particular development in the last week.
We cover stories where there is an agenda for the West to actually gain some political mileage out of it, where there is oil as opposed to human...
Do you really think that journalists in newsrooms up and down this country say to themselves, right, we're only going to cover a story because it's to the advantage of the West? You're in cloud cuckoo land if you believe that.
I think editors do that. I wouldn't necessarily say that journalists do, but then journalists write stories and editors spike them. And the spiked stories cover human interest.
Have you actually got any experience of working in the media, Andrew?
I have experience of being bathed in it all my life and being able to make up my own mind.
But you've never worked in the media, because obviously I do work in the media, and you can think I'm lying to you if you want, for whatever agenda I might or might not have. But I have never seen that. Andrew, will you listen? I have never... Oh, what's the point? What is the point? If somebody isn't actually willing to listen to what you're saying, what is the point?
All right, June from Lowestoft, tell us what you think.
Well, I think I like Mr. Trump. I think he's great. One thing you've got to remember is, Maajid, he's a businessman. He puts business first to run the country and do the job.
Well, it's true he's a businessman, and I suspect with games he's playing with North Korea are an indication of the art of the deal that he believes he can strike. But explain in your mind, June, how it works here in this case.
Well, for me personally, Maajid, I look at it like this. Now, you know that I represent the fishing industry, and if only our government woke up and done their job like Mr. Trump, we can bring all that fish back. And what do we need, Maajid? What do we need built? We need ships, because we've cut all ours up, because the Dutch took all ours. So we've cut all our boats. So we now need steel to replenish our shipping. We need shipbuilding again in this country. We're lazy. These politicians have not got a clue about business. So, I'm afraid to say it, but they haven't. So in my opinion, I feel so sorry. I watched a documentary type of thing with a little Welsh guy on there this morning, and I sympathised with him, because that's what we have in the fishing industry every day of the week.
So politicians are clueless, but we're lazy. So how do you think, June, that considering our politicians are clueless and that we're lazy, after Brexit happens, how do you think we're going to get any better at negotiating with the clout and the might of the US economy?
Well, I don't know, not quite yet. I mean, maybe the government will have to change, have a shift about.
Do you know, June, like, you know what, let me break it down in my mind. This is how it works, okay? If you've got a large group of friends and you're facing off against another large group of friends, you're protected. But if you offend that large group of friends and tell them that you don't like them and walk away from them and then try and face off another large group of friends, you're left on your own. Now, no one's going to help you. Isn't that what we just did with Brexit?
No, I'm not going to get into all the Brexit thing. This is about Trump and steel.
Yeah, and but no, June, I'm getting... No, June, hold on, I'm getting into it. Because Trump... We were led to believe that we have a special relationship with America, and after Brexit, we will have our own trade deals with America. And what's just happened to me indicates that we don't have the clout to separately negotiate with America. If even as members of the EU we can't have that successful negotiation, how on earth are we going to do it alone? It looks to me like we're going to lose from both ends, June.
Yeah, well, no, we're not. Can't you see what that guy...
I can't, no, so I'm asking you to explain it to me.
He's doing our Prime Minister's job. He's telling that EU and that lot there, no, you're not going to mess me about. I'm going to fight for my country. Yeah. Once we come out of the EU, he will help us.
Why? But you just heard from Anders in Vienna. Like, how will he help us? He's got no reason to help us. Why would he help us?
Oh, well, hang on a minute, Maajid. Don't you think we should help ourselves? Get off our backs.
No, you just said he will help us. I'm asking you. I'm not telling you what I think.
Well, I think he will.
Why? Why would he help us?
He's great. Pardon?
Why would he? Why would he help us?
Because they are our greatest ally. He's half British.
Yeah, but he just told us he's whacking a 25% on our steel. How is he our greatest ally?
Well, at the moment he is. He's making them wake up. He's clever. Maajid is clever. Look at the guy. You must give him some credit.
June, I can assure you, I've done an entire show on giving him credit where credit is due, especially over his foreign policy, right? So I'm honestly trying to understand this particular case, which is how on earth we think we're deluding ourselves, surely, if we think that we can negotiate great trade deals as a tiny country if we can't even do it as part of the largest trade bloc in the world.
Well, we're going to have to really start doing these things, aren't we? We used to do, and used to be very good at it. This is the thing, Maajid. We don't do anything anymore. I'll give you an example. I work with all these wind farms, right? You know these wind farms? Yeah, well... We just built all the wind farms in our North Sea with cheap Chinese steel.
Yeah.
Just had SSE, this is. They've just had to have that all replaced.
But you know what I'd argue? I'd argue that free trade needs to begin with free countries, and so I'm more worried about the Western Hemisphere starting a trade war with itself, not necessarily China, June. But June, do you know what the date is today?
June the 2nd or 3rd? I'm not.
It's the 1st of June. June. There we are. It's a day for you. All right, June. Take care. Lovely to speak to you. June there from Lowsley. Back to Sarah from New Malden. Tell us what you think.
Yeah, I find this absolutely bizarre. We had a vote. We're ready to leave. Even people I know that voted Remain. The minute this soft and hard Brexit is just who made up this phraseology? We voted to leave. It's time to leave. I understand that there are a lot of people that aren't happy about it.
But Sarah, you've got to understand something, though. Just as I've been trying over the course of this hour, as you may have heard, I hope, to understand different perspectives on this. You know, when you say we voted to leave, that means different things to different people. So the term soft Brexit, hard Brexit, no deal scenario, these are all words that we use to describe what different Brexiteers mean by Brexit, because even among Brexiteers it means different things.
Well, but the thing is, I think there's an awful lot of conflation happening here. You know, I understand there are some people on both sides that either vehemently leave or vehemently remain. However, we had a vote, and that's how it works in a democracy. We had a vote. We need to leave. That means leaving the customs union. None of this, people didn't know what they were voting.
Well, no, but Sarah, see, what you've just added there, that means, you know, as in what leave means is, that's your interpretation of it, and of course another Brexiteer might say something different. Let me give you an example, Sarah. Michael Gove's vision of Brexit and Boris Johnson's vision of Brexit is quite different, I'd argue, to Nigel Farage's vision of Brexit, and, you know, they were three leaders in the campaign.
That might well be true, and I'm sure if you got Labour politicians that would discuss Labour perspectives on things and Conservative perspectives, but the main fundamentals, we were told that if we voted leave, that we'll be leaving the customs union. I genuinely find it bizarre that this negativity is astounding. You know, all the Armageddon we were told that was going to happen when we leave hasn't, and yet people still...
We haven't left yet, Sarah. No, come on, Sarah, we haven't left yet.
Yeah, well, we heard that. We haven't left yet. Yeah. I know we haven't left yet, but we should have left. And we should now be... There's so many things that we could be doing. It's bizarre. And one thing I would say to you, I actually campaigned for leave. Yeah. I never, in all of my thought processes and all of the reading I did about it, I never for one it had anything to do with immigration. This is fallacious.
Oh,
it was to do
all right,
with
Sarah. No, but come on, Sarah. Come on. We all remember the hordes coming over the border campaign poster. Come on, Sarah. You may not have voted over immigration, but the campaign did.
Well, but we all remember hearing we were going to be, you know, straight away there was Armageddon.
Yeah, I'm not defending that. You've just heard me over the course of this hour saying those scenarios may not be realistic. But you can't argue, just like I can't argue that the Remainers didn't do that, you can't argue that Brexiteers didn't stoke fears of immigration.
Well, the only thing I would say to you, of all the people I know, and this were people that were Conservative voters, Labour voters, from the London bubble through to up north, and all of the people I knew that voted leave, none of them had the immigration as their reason.
All right.
Now, maybe I'm lucky. Maybe I'm lucky I don't have friends like that. But, you know, please don't.
Hi, Sarah.
Please don't.
Yeah, but you didn't. No, but you didn't hear me say that. It was a caller. But thank you very much, Sarah. There from New Malden.
On one thing, you can't limit people's birth rate for a start. You can't suggest that. And the bombings that take place so often happen. The bombings and the terrorist attacks. I just don't understand, really. I don't understand why it's a first or a second generation who are so moved to act in the way they do against countries which have offered them a home. I don't understand.
Yeah, quite often they'll bite the nipple that they suckle from, of course.
Well, just careful of the language, Danny, and the visuals in a way, can you?
Mate, I'm just being real. If you want to sugarcoat it,
I'm just asking you politely, Danny, if you don't mind.
Yeah, listen, I'm just telling you the truth. And a lot of people don't want to hear it. So if we don't establish some kind of cuts and controls, you know that the population of the third world is developing on rises by 5%.
But what are we supposed to do, Danny? What are you supposed to do, apart from just live the way that is the right way to live for you, and to lead by example, and to keep, you know, educating, showing tolerance, democracy, freedom of speech? That is the only way, logically, to counter what is clearly a foul and vile message, which is getting through to particularly some young men. That's the only way. We have to lead by our own example, do we not?
Yeah, but if we lead by example, that's all well and good. But if we don't cut and severely restrict immigration from these countries, what you'll find is our way of life will dwindle and wither away. And in 100 years' time, our great-grandchildren, the country that we know now, will not be the same. And we need to take action because it's weak-minded people at the moment that have led to this. We've had governments that have successively let us down and led to this. In 1 or 2 generations, we've gone from having no issues whatsoever and 5% of the population causing us so many different issues. But other groups are not. And it needs to be exposed. It needs to be talked about.
Well, Danny, we're talking about it now, and I'm moving on. I appreciate your point of view, and it's a point of view which is
It's the right point of view.
Well, it's a point of view that is reflected in the text.
It's a native point of view. It's my point of view.
Well, no, you don't have to. You've had your say, Danny, and I appreciate you calling. Thank you very much indeed.
Robert in Romford. Hello, Robert.
Hello, Clive.
Hello.
Basically, my idea was, why don't we end the Commonwealth to assuage those people who mainly voted to come out of Europe for the immigration side of things?
Well, yes, we could.
For example, if you take, for example, healthcare assistants, they're largely made up of Africans, Nigerians and Ghanaians. Now, the way I see things, Nigeria is a very wealthy country with plenty of natural resources. It has 2 main problems, Boko Haram in the north and corruption, which is endemic in Africa anyway. And my idea is that instead of running away from problems like that, the Nigerians should stay and make their country a better place instead of running away to this country. That's the first point. And the other point I want to make
and
is...
stay in the EU, you're saying then? Come out of the Commonwealth instead?
Not necessarily. What I would say is we could then instigate a more a phased withdrawal from Europe. For example, starting with no free movement of Eastern Europeans, for example. So we could have free movement of the original handful of European countries, the Western European countries, and this would start to because the whole idea is the whole aim of this is for people to be able to buy or rent a home at a reasonable price. And they can't do that at the moment. I can speak from experience because in 1988 I actually bought a house myself without a mortgage, and I worked for a shipping company. I was probably the second lowest paid employee there. Only the cleaners were probably only less than me. And just by myself, saving for 15 years, I was able to buy a house for $63,000, an ordinary
yes.
bog standard.
Well, there are lots of stories like that, but isn't the real problem? It's not particularly the EU or the Commonwealth or anybody else. It's the fact that our governments have not planned to build any more houses. They stopped building houses, and they've put obstacles in the way of building houses. That's the problem. We have not built enough homes. You're quite right. We haven't built enough homes. No.
But I'm.
So do we solve that by saying it's all the fault of immigration?
No, but what I'm saying is, why has this point not been raised about bringing the Commonwealth to an end? So that we could control
I think
immigration from the Asian subcontinent plus Africa.
I don't think the Queen would like it.
She may not be around for too much longer. We could make it coincide with, when her...
I think Prince Charles is very committed to it as well. I don't think the Commonwealth will be going anywhere any time. Clearly, the disconnect is you cannot have a policy where there's continuing net migration in large numbers and not deal with the housing issue, which is what successive governments have done. Robert, thank you. Elena is in Bayswater. Hello.
Oh, hello. Thank you for having me.
Okay.
I just wanted to say that all this doomsday talk is just ludicrous.
Right.
I mean, if, for example, the French or the Germans were to stop us using their airports, that would actually be a declaration of war.
Well, that sounds like a doomsday scenario then.
Yeah, but they wouldn't do it because they don't want to actually declare war.
But you've still got to arrange things. If you're going to have flights in and out of countries with new agreements, you've got to actually have those agreements. You've got to set the flight times. You can't just hope it's all going to happen all right.
Well, you do. Well, then you set the flight times.
Yeah, but they haven't.
I mean,
they haven't even got an agreement on it. They haven't dealt with this issue.
Well, I mean, I'm just giving that as an example.
Sure. Well, it's a very good example, because people in the aviation industry are tearing their hair out. They're saying, well, what is going to be the arrangement? We're only months away now and we still don't know.
Well, because we're talking, because we're talking sort of blackmail at the moment. And for example, you know, the very idea that the Europeans are going to stop trading with us is ludicrous. I mean, they're making much more money out of us than we are out of them. I mean, I really can't understand why the politicians just don't go straight to businesses, you know, starting with the big ones.
Well, but businesses will want to trade, of course they will, but you've still got to come to an arrangement.
Well, I don't really see why anything should change, really.
Well, because we're EU, so you have to have new arrangements in place. We have to know what's in lorries, where it's going, where it's come from.
Well, the thing is that there is that all the goods that we import and export outside the EU,
yes,
you know, sort of travel backwards and forwards on a sort of barcode system.
Yes.
There was an article...
Sounds a very good idea, but where is that barcode system? We haven't sorted it out. I mean, it's just...
It's already running. It's already running.
But it's not running in those lorries that are coming to and fro the EU. Elena, I wish I could talk to you longer. Thank you so much for calling.
0345 60 60973, and we're going to David on the line from St Albans. Speak to us, David.
Hi there, Maajid.
Hello.
Yes, of course, the long-term aim of Islam is to convert everyone to Islam, and these people in prison...
Is that the case, David? Is that really the case for that every devout Muslim believes that?
Yes, you know that. It's in the doctrine of the Quran, isn't it?
You just heard a Muslim on radio say he wishes he joined the intelligence services to stop terrorists.
Well, that's one, isn't it? But there's 20,000 on a watch list, apparently, aren't there?
Yeah, 20,000 out of 5 million in this country.
Yes, but 20,000 is still a large number, isn't it?
I didn't say it wasn't. I'm the one who gave you that number. I just opened up my show saying it was a large number. That doesn't mean every single Muslim wants to take over this country, though, David.
No, they don't. No, I agree with you. Yeah. But it's the aim of the people that are doing the terrorism.
Yeah, of course it is. This is the aim of the terrorists, definitely. Yeah.
So the thing is that everyone goes on about the right wing. There have been several marches in London which were given a press blackout because that was for freedom of speech, and this is what people are going to lose. It's happening, and.
So you don't? So do you not think that there is another concern with right-wing extremism in this country?
No, I don't.
Not at all.
Not extremism. No, it's a reaction to what's happening to
Well, I mean, chicken and egg. I mean, that doesn't really get us very far, does it, David? Because the Islamist terrorists will tell you that hold on. The Islamist terrorists will tell you that theirs is a reaction to the invasion of Iraq. It doesn't really get us anywhere, does it? To start talking about action and reaction. At the end of the day, why is it that surely, if there is a problem with right-wing extremism, whether it came first or last, it's still a problem.
It's not a problem because can you name any right-wing extremists?
Yeah, I can actually. Yeah, Darren Osborne just ran his van into a group of Muslims outside a mosque.
One man, yes, and that man apparently he hit was had to.
What about the killer of Joe Cox, MP, David?
That's two men.
Oh, so first it starts with, can I name a right-wing extremist? I name one, you say that's just one. I name a second, that's just two.
Yeah.
Yeah. David.
Okay, now we're maybe running a bit short. Can you name any other ones?
Well, is this a memory test, David? I've just given you two names.
It's very unbalanced, isn't it? That's the thing.
Well, I'm not saying it's not. You're speaking to the wrong man here, David. I'm the first to say that the threat of terrorism in this country is disproportionately coming from jihadists. That doesn't mean that there isn't a threat coming from the right wing.
Yeah, but it's a very small threat, isn't it? That's the point. It's a very small reaction to the number of people that have
David, what point are you trying to make? Because whether it's a larger threat, a medium threat, a small threat, or a threat in between, I mean, what are you? Is this a competition? Is this a game show? You know, name a right-wing terrorist and I'll give you a balloon.
Look at both sides of it and think if there hadn't been the terrorist attacks, there wouldn't have been the right-wing attacks.
And that logic is precisely the logic extremist Islamists use when they say, if you hadn't invaded Iraq, we wouldn't have done 7/7. It's a flawed logic, David. It's flawed because it seeks to shirk responsibility for one's own extremism and place it on innocent people. Thank you very much, David, for calling in. That's David from St Albans.
If you have views on Anne Robinson talking about how union chiefs and MPs used to try to get into her bedroom when drink perhaps got the better of all and sundry. Alf in Halifax. What are you going to tell me, Alf? Good morning.
Hello. Well, I think myself that in today's world, I think women are using sex as a weapon, really. In my time in work...
Right. When did a woman last use sex against you, Alf?
Well, you mean other than the wife?
Yes, other than the wife, yes.
No, they haven't, because I've been very protective of myself along them lines.
Right.
But what I'm saying is I have witnessed... I've only ever worked at 3 jobs.
Right.
And in each of them, I think I've seen... women using it to enhance their position, shall we say.
Really?
You know.
Yes.
Yes, so.
You don't recognise the problems of Me Too and men who are in powerful positions exerting undue pressure?
I think it has worked that way as well.
Right.
But I don't think it's to anything like the degree that women like to think of it as.
All right. Al, thank you for that. From your experience of the 3 workplaces you've been. Peter's in Croydon. Peter, what can you tell me? Good morning.
Good morning, Nick. First-time caller.
Good to have you on, Peter. What are you going to tell me?
Well, what I want to say is that we always hear about the men being rude and unpleasant to the women, but what about the women who are rude and unpleasant to other women, such as the lesbian women, for example?
What?
That happens as well. I mean,
Have you seen lesbian women being rude to other women?
Absolutely. I work down at...
You're not going to name a company, are you? No.
No, but I work very closely to where tennis was being played.
Right.
Okay, so let's think of women tennis players, okay?
Ah, yes, I've read about this.
Yes, and the fact that young women tennis players had to have a chaperone walk them around because of other women who were going after them. But we don't think about that, do we?
Well, it's not quite the same, is it, as drunken MPs wandering around trying to sleep with young female journalists as...
No, but if a young woman is being pursued by anybody, male or female, it is just as bad.
I would agree with you. Yes, I would agree. Of course, it's not right that they're pursued by anyone, whether it's a drunken trade union boss or a lesbian tennis player. Extraordinary how we got there. Peter, thank you. That was a rare moment. Lisa in Yaxley, which I think is in Cambridgeshire, isn't it? Is that where am I wrong?
Yeah, that's right. I'm not actually there. I'm driving south on the A1.
The old A1, an honest road.
Yeah, so I'm glad this subject's come up. I've only been listening to LBC for a couple of months now.
This is sensational.
Yeah, I think that being English and proud now is suppressed. So I'm 40 in December.
Oh, congratulations. Are you planning anything special?
Cape Verde, thank you very much.
Wow, that's pretty special.
It will be.
Fantastic.
But I've got a 14-year-old and a 9-year-old child that doesn't see England how I do.
Right.
Because it's not celebrated in school anymore for St. George's Day. There's a stigma behind flying your flag.
Though,
when you're English.
in 2 weeks' time, everybody will be flying flags, won't they, for the World Cup?
For the World Cup, yeah. But what happens on St. George's Day? Nothing.
Right, right.
And St. Patrick's Day, it's a big event. Everybody celebrates it. It's proud to be Irish.
Yeah.
I don't think you can be proud to be English anymore.
Oh, you
in
can.
England.
In 2 weeks' time, you'll be able to. People will...
4 years is not good enough, though, is it, really?
No, possibly not.
Schools are not... My children say that it's racist to say that you're English. it is very suppressed nowadays. And your last caller saying about freedom. Freedom is being suppressed in the UK as well, massively at the moment. There isn't freedom of speech. There isn't freedom of saying what you want.
What are you doing? Respectfully, Lisa, what are you doing now? You're just saying it, aren't you? Isn't that great that you can?
I am, and I do think, you know, the census forms, the passports, you know, a Welshman can say they're Welsh, an Irishman can say they're Irish, and a Scotsman can say he's Irish. As an English woman, I cannot, on a form on my passport...
Well, you can, because there's a box other, doesn't it? And if it's important to you... I know what you're going to say. You should have English in your own right, and I understand it, and there is a very, very valid argument to that, and it does seem unfair. And I get that. But the idea, therefore, that we're not perhaps free to speak, I think, is a stretch. Lisa, let's talk again. Thank you for finding this radio station as well. We'll talk before your birthday, because that's a few months. Safe driving to you.
Chris from Reading, tell us what you think.
Oh, hi, yes. Yeah, well, we're very good at being able to sweep things under the carpet and just say lessons have been learned. There's Rotherham, Jimmy Savile.
Yep.
We've just put a guy in prison for being a journalist and highlighting...
Oh, who's that, Chris?
It's Tommy Robinson.
No, that's not why he was put in prison, Chris.
Yeah, but he was put in prison previously.
Well, he was convicted last year for contempt of court. Yeah. And let go, and told that if he repeats the offence, then the suspended sentence will be implemented. Hold on, Chris. Hold on, Chris. And then he repeated the offence, and the sentence was implemented. And that's putting aside my own anger at the unjust treatment of the girls that were groomed and the cover-up scandal in Rotherham, and the official inquiry into that found there was a scandal. You know, I've spoken about that openly on LBC, but it doesn't serve us to pretend that it doesn't serve us to pretend that Tommy Robinson was jailed simply for reporting. That's just simply not true.
Why was he put in prison with Muslim extremists and almost killed in prison? When they knew
Chris, you know what? I'm afraid, because I don't know what's going on in prison, I can't entertain and speculate about that.
But that's corruption, isn't it?
Well, I don't know what's going on in prison, and so I'm not going to comment on stuff I don't know about. What I do know is he was reconvicted by a judge for contempt of court, not for reporting like we can report on LBC. He violated a court order, which, you know, actually is a sign of a lack of corruption, because the rule of law stands in this country against everybody, no matter who they are. Chris, thanks for calling in. And Nick wants to speak to us from Solihull. Go for it, Nick.
Hello there. Well, first of all, I'd like to correct you on your pro-European stance. Wasn't it blatantly obvious that when we voted, 17.4 million people gave the two fingers up to the European Union? And
half the country, half the country.
Pardon? Yeah, half the country.
Yeah, the other half didn't.
So we're not pro-you, are we? How can we be?
Well, it's 52-48 there, Nick. Come on.
Yeah. Yeah.
So it's not like you can't say...
The majority of people voted...
Yeah, that's right. I'm not... Nick, I'm not disputing... It's not about Brexit, Nick. I'm not disputing that.
I know you're not disputing it, but let's put the equation in perspective. We voted to leave, meaning that we're not pro-European.
Well, to put it into perspective... The word perspective means let's actually look at the full facts, and 52% and 48% is quite a narrow margin, Nick.
OK, well, you're splitting hairs on that, then. Well, the reason...
I'm not the one who raised it.
I was interviewed by the Guardian newspaper, and I predicted a domino effect. Because the EU has deserted Italy, Greece, and all these other countries have now become Eurosceptics. The reason being is that, obviously, the migration problem, which was also caused by George Soros, who invested $18 billion to fund open borders. As a consequence, Mrs. Merkel, she's lost her power sort of seat as such, and the new Italian government is rightly so very anti-European, because let's be frank about it. None of these commissioners have ever been elected by the general public.
Well, European Parliament... Hang on a minute. Nigel Farage sits in the European Parliament and he's elected.
He's an MEP, he's not a commissioner.
Yeah, but the Parliament is elected and the European Council is in charge. The European Commission, yes, is unelected. That's like saying that Whitehall's not elected, the civil service isn't elected. It's because they're the bureaucracy. The European Council, Nick, which runs the European Union, is made of ministers who are elected in their respective countries.
the Commission has got...
No, but the Commission... Nick, respond to this, please. Answer this. The European Commission are bureaucrats. That's like saying Whitehall and the civil service aren't elected. But the European Council that runs the European Union and the European Parliament that legislates for it are both elected bodies, and they run it, and the Commission are the bureaucrats. Do you understand, Nick?
Yes, I do.
Right, so what that the Commission isn't elected? That's like arguing Whitehall isn't elected.
They are elected by a secret ballot.
Who is?
The commissioners.
No, but... OK, all right, but I'm saying I don't... That doesn't really trouble me, because the European Council that runs the European Union is comprised of ministers who are elected in their respective countries. But, Nick, thank you very much. That's Nick there from Solihull. Moody from Fulham. Go for it.
Yeah, I don't think the EU can be saved. I don't think you can stop populism, because the EU reminds me of the Titanic.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, the Titanic sunk because 5 compartments got breached. Yeah, and it could have stayed up with 3 or 4. And the EU's year by year is getting a breach after breach after breach. So England's gone, Poland's basically gone, Hungary's gone.
Matt, the Poland and Hungary have gone. You mean have they Brexited?
Yeah, technically they've gone. They don't listen to anything that the EU says. They do what they want.
Yeah.
They just take, but they don't give anything.
What do you are you pro EU or are you pro Brexit?
I voted to leave because, well, I don't know. I just couldn't vote to stay in.
Doesn't that sentence, folks, to describe what we had? I voted leave because, well, I don't know why I did. Rudy, I think the problem here, before I let you come back on this, Rudy, I think the concern that we who grew up studying the EU project, working in some capacity or another for an ever closer union. I grew up studying EU law, for example, and the concern we have when you say I voted to leave the EU because I don't know why. I mean, that's the kind of I'm happy you said it because it's why we need this conversation. But also B, I think we can't surely all of us collectively as a country destroy the future of our younger generations and the polity that they want to grow up in because I don't know. That nonchalant approach to the future of the political construct of our nation, I just want to caution against it because, the young overwhelmingly voted to stay in the European Union, and just imagine, Rudy, how they feel if they hear that the reason you voted against their wishes is because, I don't know. Rudy?
Okay, firstly, I have 4 children, okay? Yep. They're all under 16, okay? And when I voted, their future was the first thing on my mind. I didn't care about myself because I'm 52, so I'll be gone soon.
Yeah,
but the point is, and as for the young, we keep coming back to this argument about the young. The young get older.
But how could their future be on your mind when you don't know why you voted to leave, Rudy?
I didn't say I don't know why I voted.
Oh, you did say I don't know. I heard you.
Yes, but I meant in the terms of there were so many reasons.
All right, okay.
Put it into one.
I'll take that.
I started laughing almost immediately.
Yeah, no, I'll take that. Well, can you give me a reason?
Yes, I can give you a reason.
Yeah.
I don't see how my son, my daughters are going to get a job in this country. I really don't see how they are.
Rudy, real wages and employment continue to rise. Actually, interestingly, despite Brexit, we have an incredibly strong economy at the moment, despite the vote on Brexit. I mean, I know we haven't Brexited yet, but even in America, it's the case. The economy is growing. We're slowly, ever so slowly, recovering from the global economic crash. So I'm not so sure, Rudy, why you don't think your 4 daughters are going to get a job.
Because you keep talking to people like me about the economy.
Well, you just said the economy is...
The economy makes no difference to me.
Well, no. It makes a difference to whether your daughters are going to get a job. It may not make any difference to the political consequences of the argument. I've already acknowledged that in this hour. But it does make a difference as to whether your daughters are going to get a job.
How so?
Well, because Rudy, economic growth means job creation, Rudy. Come on, Rudy.
So many jobs in this country. We can afford 3.5 million people from other parts of Europe to give them jobs.
Yeah, that's what economic growth is. But our NHS is telling us that we've got too many shortages for positions that need to be filled. For example, for nurses and doctors, which is why they're asking for Sajid Javid to loosen his immigration restrictions because we haven't got enough people to fill those jobs. you know, at the end of the day, growth means jobs. But anyway, Rudy, thank you for calling in.
But Dean in Bromley wants to talk about visas and doctors. Hello, Dean.
Yeah, hi there. Yeah, I feel that we have built our British Empire for 400 years on slavery and taking advantage of the Indian subcontinent, and I think it's time we gave back rather than took from them. In my opinion, we should be asking some of the Great Britons, like David Lammy or Doreen Lawrence, and say, your work here is done. We would really appreciate if you go to some of these other countries and build those...
I'm sorry, say what to David Lammy and who else?
And like Doreen, with truly Great Britons of colour, and say what difference you could make back into society in Jamaica or in India, rather than us keep stealing talent, give some of the talent back to these countries.
What,
so they can build their country to be as great as us.
Well, I don't know where Doreen Lawrence was born, but I do know that David Lammy was born in the UK.
I know, but what I'm saying is that his parents were born in Jamaica or wherever, and we took them from Jamaica to here to build our country great. And
we didn't take them. We didn't take them.
We invited them, but we could ask them, could you go and help the country that we have been effectively enslaved for the last 400 years, and build them as great as we are? Give something back rather.
Would you go? Or is it only brown-skinned people who have to go?
No. If you come from a poor country originally, and we've taken advantage of you for 400 years...
I do. Shall I go back to Ireland?
If you could build it as great as Britain and help, that would be a great thing, don't you think?
Should I leave Britain and go to Ireland because my parents left Ireland to come to Britain?
I'm not asking you, I'm saying that if you would...
Well, just David Lammy, then.
Well, he has made Britain great with democracy. Could he not help make his country of his parents' birth great with helping with democracy?
You can do that without emigrating there, can't you?
I'm not asking him to emigrate, I'm asking him to go and help.
But what if a Jamaican or an Indian doctor says, listen, I want to be the best surgeon in, I don't know, maxillofacial surgeon, or one of the best, and the place to learn that is in St Thomas's in London. I want to work there for a decade. I'm going to go and compete for that job. They're quite within their rights to do that, aren't they?
Well, they are. Well, then you've got some poor Indian boy who needs that surgery. He can't get it because the Indian doctor is busy in St Thomas's, and then he has to go to hell in a handcart. And all we are doing is constantly...
No, I mean, it's well, for a start, India has a monumentally large population for a start, so that's numbers-wise, that's not necessarily true. And many of the doctors and nurses and others who work here for years do take those skills back.
So it's okay to steal their best talent while at the prime of their career, and we can give them back when they're washed up.
But it's not stealing them, washed up or really experienosed and skilled.
At the prime of their careers. Yeah, we should be sending our best surgeons to them and training them.
We do.
No,
they just don't emigrate. No, we do.
We should be giving our talent.
We do.
So why are we taking talent from abroad then?
Well, I mean, medicine is an international profession. Thank God, because we can all benefit from the knowledge internationally that's garnered.
Giving away all these people you're talking about, why are we advertising for overseas jobs?
Because we've got vacancies we can't fill.
Because we're sending people abroad. In your words, not mine.
No, we're not sending people abroad permanently. I said medicine is an international profession where ideas and skills and people are shared around the world.
Well, the problem is that Britain is greedy and we want everything and we want to give nothing back. Yeah, and then when it comes to time to give something back, no, we want more.
So you want to reduce the numbers of foreign doctors and nurses in this country to favour their own countries, regardless of what those... All right, hang on. Regardless of what those foreign doctors and nurses themselves want, and regardless of vacancies that exist in this country that they could successfully fill.
Absolutely.
Okay, thanks, Dean. Dean and Bromley. Chris has called from Victoria. Hello, Chris.
Hello. The last caller made several scientific errors. First of all, it's not their body because their body doesn't have two different blood groups, doesn't have two different noses. It's quite clearly scientifically not their body at all. I'm amazed that people still repeat something so obviously...
Say that again. It's quite clear. Your line isn't great, Chris. It's quite clearly what?
Not their body, because their body doesn't have two different blood groups. It doesn't have two different noses or four different eyes. That's an error that has many times been refuted. I'm amazed people are still repeating that clear error. The second point that he was wrong about was that he's simply saying, it's a matter that, so if you're religious, it's nothing to do with being religious. It's to do with the fact that you understand scientifically that the human being is the most amazing thing in the entire world. in terms of intricacy and in terms of how developed it is. What's religious about that? Nothing. Nothing religious about it whatsoever. It's just that you are caring and compassionate, you're logical, you've got common sense, and you take the scientific point of view, which every scientific textbook holds to. These people are anti-science because they are saying that life does not begin at conception, and therefore they are disagreed with by every single scientific textbook. They're just doing it for their own convenience.
Well, there is a certain stages of the pregnancy, Chris. You might be onto something with what the science proves, but the science, when it comes to those very early stages of conception, has not definitively proved anything about not just life. Clearly there is the beginnings of life there, but the debate around abortion is about more than that, isn't it? It's about personhood.
No, they make it about personhood because they know that that's a man-made philosophical concept which can never be accurately defined, and therefore it's sophistry. They deliberately put that concept in the centre because they know that they can never get a satisfactory definition of it by definition.
Yeah, but Chris, you know, speaking of religion, even the churches, plural, didn't regard a miscarried fetus as a life worthy of heaven. They were not. They didn't used to be buried. They didn't used to be regarded as going to heaven. They didn't used to be regarded as part of the Christian family because they hadn't been baptized. Fast forward 150 years, and we have an entirely different argument about the personhood, the value, the intrinsic human value of those fetuses. And you can't have your cake and eat it.
I agree with you because I think the churches are quite wrong on that. I think this is in pre-scientific days. The question is this human or not? And if somebody is human, then that person is of the highest possible species. It is also your own flesh and blood, your own son or daughter. Therefore, there is no question. It's not a particularly controversial thing. Would you kill your own son and daughter?
Well, for you it isn't. For you it isn't.
Nobody could kill their own son and daughter.
Well, sadly they do on quite a regular basis.
Well, it is very sad. It's outrageous. And we are walking the streets with people who would even do that.
Can I bring you back from... Clearly you feel passionately about the fundamental intrinsic issue of abortion. I get that. Let's go back to the question of...
not feelings.
Oh, all right. No, but all right, Chris, I'm just saying what I'd like to do is talk about it now through the prism of Northern Ireland, if I may. Sure. Should Westminster be getting involved in questions around how Northern Ireland interprets the devolved health issue that is abortion as the law stands at the moment?
They obviously think that they're the elite and they're the right-thinking, right-on people who don't even mention the fact that they're killing a human being, which is the central question.
OK, Chris, thank you very much indeed for your call. Scott in Nottingham, hello.
Hello, how are you doing? I'm
fine, thank you, Scott. How do you see the Miss America decision?
Not a lot to be said, really, other than if you look at it clinically, 50% of the planet are men, 50% of the planet are women, a little bit more, actually. But men like looking at women, women like looking at men. So stop messing with things and leave it be.
And what does leave it be mean?
Well, so you've got, obviously, on the side of the world pageant, there's no disguising it. It's simply it's ogletree, and people like looking at women in bikinis, and there's nothing wrong with that. In the same breath, women go to Magic Mike nights, for example, at pubs and clubs and nightclubs and so on and so forth, and look at male strippers, and so stop banning things. If you're going to ban that, then ban this. And in the meantime, why we're having a discussion about the rights of a woman's possible thoughts and what she may or may not have worn to go into a pageant that she's already pre-decided she's going to go into, and at the end of it she's going to get a paycheck and some celebrity. So I just don't get it. Just leave things be. Stop messing in.
So leave the bikini section in the pageants?
Leave everything be. Stop banning things. Stop worrying about things. Stop harassing, and it's just something for the media to talk about when there's nothing on the news.
Well, you stop banning things, stop talking about things. That wouldn't have got people anywhere, would it? With kids up chimneys and women not being allowed to work and women having to get their father's signature to get a house. If we didn't campaign to ban certain things, then we'd never get anywhere, would we?
I think we've got far enough, don't you?
No, I don't.
In what way?
Well, you first, Scott. Gentlemen first. In what way have we got far enough on equality?
Well, my partner works. I work. Our money is shared. Everything is happy days. There's no problems there. There's no I ask her to wear this or tell her not to wear that. That's just life, and life goes on. She's female, I'm male, and there's no argument to be had.
I'm not talking about your house. I'm talking about society.
As far as society is concerned, it just seems to me that every single time you turn the radio on, flick the TV on, there's always somebody, and I've got to say it's coming from the female point of view, objecting about something.
That men don't object to things.
We should more, really.
Here's your opportunity. What do you want to object to?
Oh, a million and one things.
Well, go on. Start with one.
Right then. Okay, so let's look at TV, for example. Okay, so every time you see an advert on the TV, okay, seldom do you see an example of a strong white working man doing a damn good job being a good dad or what have you. They're always the fool guy, they're always the butt of the joke, they're always example. It's then you, and on the flip side, I pity women because you see adverts for just to pick a brand, say L'Oreal, whatever. Now with new jojoba from a monkey's bottom, mined from the most
cosmetic nonsense, you mean?
Yeah, exactly, absolute cosmetic nonsense.
Well, that's now the joy of men as well, isn't it? The ads for men are just as ludicrous.
Well, of course they are.
You know, if you shave, you have to be a complete hunk shaving. You can't just be some bloke a bit tired in the morning being bored because he's shaving.
Well, no, I refuse to buy a razor. I will buy the cheapest razor and sort my face out. Every time you put something on the news, on the TV, and there's a new razor come out, buy this, blah, 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 blah.
The best a man can get.
The best a man can get. It's the same thing. It's just a piece of metal you put to your face. So it's not changed in a long, long time. And I don't bow to that either. And it's just really, really sad.
But have you ever been told? Well, you know, we heard earlier on from Dave saying that in his time in the civil service, it was very restrictive as to what men can wear. Can you think of any aspect of your life where there are what you would regard as unjust restrictions placed on you?
No, I quite enjoy wearing a uniform. So if I was to...
Which uniform do you wear, if I may ask?
Well, I'm a salesperson, so I wear a tie and a shirt and a suit, so...
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
And that's sort of pro forma for everyone at work, is it? Men and women?
It's by the by. As long as if I had a female colleague, as long as she looks smart, it bears no difference. So as long as they're smart of appearance, stop whinging about things. Obviously, I'm wrong to have a whinge, but do you see my point?
I do. Just a word on the women in your workplace. Do they have to wear heels?
And this is another thing. Getting back to men like looking at women. It's never going to change.
No, just answer the question about the heels.
Do they have to?
Yeah. Are they encouraged to wear heels at work, or can they come in flats?
I'm going to sound terribly sexist and say I think they should.
So that their leg looks nicer for you to look at?
Absolutely.
Thanks, Scott.
James is in Hornchurch. Hello, James.
Hello there. Yes, I totally agree with the last caller, and I would take it a step further. I believe that these people in the government are absolutely spitting on the graves of the war dead in this country. They fought and died. All the things, all the documentaries we've ever seen, all the films, all the evidence, all the family stories we've ever known about the war and what happened. And the fact that we tried to have all these battles to get out of being run by a fascist dictatorship.
Well, look, I can be very virulent in my criticism of the EU, but it is not a fascist dictatorship. I mean, that's a ridiculous thing to say.
James, you think David Davis has betrayed the nation. How so?
Yeah, well, I do, Sheila. I agree totally with that lady's been saying, but David Davis should have done this for a point. He should have walked out, because I feel we have been betrayed. 17.4 million of us have been betrayed. We've been betrayed as bovine cowards, racists, bigots for the last over 2 years. We haven't got our foot out the door. We won't get our foot out the door till 2021, presumably. That won't be cast in stone, because I will tell this now to Theresa May and all you Ramonas out there. The joy you taste right now will turn to ashes in your mouth. We may not have our chance now, but there's 17.4 million of us. We will have our chance.
Well, hang on, James. You're speaking as though Brexit is over.
But it is. You've betrayed us. Free movement of people will continue till 2021. The European courts will continue till 2021.
It's only a couple of years away. It's almost 20. It's almost 2019, James.
Yes, and we should have left. We should have left.
Yeah, but there's Theresa May has always spoken about an ordered transition, hasn't she? An ordered exit.
Well,
there's a lot at stake, James. Detail.
Well, Peter, I'm so angry. Look, the Remainers, have your wish. You can keep us in the EU. I do not care anymore. I have lost interest. I will pay the government of the day back in 2021 when we go to the polls. I'm so angry, Sheila, I'm going to have to end the call.
OK, thank you, James. But I want to know how you'll vote in the next election, but he's run away. He's not going to tell me.
Let's go to Simon in Sidcup. Hello, Simon.
Hello, Ian. How are you?
All right, thank you. What would you like to tell me?
Well, the trouble is with all these problems that are thrown up, you've got two parties who don't really want to deal. Theresa May don't want to deal. She's an arch Remainer.
Well, she isn't an arch Remainer. She isn't an arch Remainer. She did vote Remain, but she didn't exactly campaign for it, did she?
No, she's done the John Major. She disappeared to the dentist.
Exactly.
She went AWOL, didn't she? I think there was more to that than meets the eye. But all right, we'll discard the word arch. She's a Remainer. Obviously, the EU don't want to do a deal. It's a bit like putting a vegan in charge of the hog roast. It's not going to end well, is it?
Well, how do you think it is going to end then?
It'll be a fudge. It'll be a long, drawn-out fudge with us getting very little. The EU don't want us to succeed. The last thing they want to do is us ride off into the sunset doing deals all around the world, becoming successful. So their vested interest is to keep us in negotiations for as long as they possibly can, which is all part of the unwritten rules of the establishment. We scratch your back, you scratch ours. So these to-ing and fro-ings are just going to continue. Nothing hard is done, apart from us saying...
So you think it's all a massive plot, that actually the British government is in cahoots with the European Commission? I mean, seriously?
I don't know about the British government. I mean, you said earlier that that she's got a divided cabinet. Well, she could easily solve that, can't she? Just put a packet full of Brexiteers.
Well, the political realities of life in the House of Commons means that you can't do that, because you have to keep your party together. Otherwise, your whole government collapses. I think if she decided to sack all of the Remainers in the cabinet and replace them with Brexiteers, there really would be a civil war in the Conservative Party. So that's never going to happen. Simon, thank you.
Alex is in Pimlico. Alex, what would you like to say?
Morning, James. Cards on the table, Brexiteer, loving Trump's work, and...
What's your favourite bit?
Well, all of it, but I think what you...
No, your favourite bit. What's the thing he's done that you love the most?
You said you've bumped into Boris yourself.
Go on, mate. I just asked you a question. You said cards on the table. You said cards on the table, but you're not letting me look at your cards. That's an odd way of playing.
Because I want to just cut to the chase. Boris...
No, cards on the table. What's the thing Trump's done that you love the most?
Because he is a man of his word...
What's he done that you love the most?
Pardon?
What's he done that you love the most? You said, I'm loving his work. So what's the act of...
Because he's a politician who tends to, unlike here, do what he says...
Yeah, so what's he done? Well, what's the thing he's done? What's the act of work he's done?
Not in tune with the American politics.
Cards on the table, I love his work. Give me one example of the work that you love. Over to you, Alex.
Balls of steel. Okay?
No, but you're going to have to answer it before we carry on, because it's cards on the table, Alex. Those are your own words, mate.
Because he's very much like Boris. He's a cad, he's a rogue, he's always...
No, but we know all that. You said you love his work. You said cards on the table, I love his work. So show me one card. They're on the table, Alex.
What I'm trying to say to you is he's a politician, but he's not the normal politician.
Cards on the table, Alex. Just show me one of those cards that you said in that really upbeat way. Cards on the table, James. I love his work. So show me one card. One card. One card.
Some people voted Brexit, others didn't. And
one card, Alex.
Carry on.
One card.
I'm not with you, James.
One card.
but I'm not with you, James. I'm trying just to say.
I love his work. Cards on the table. Give me one example of the work that you love.
So much work, because James...
So much work. So much work. It'll be really easy to give me one example.
No. Everybody in London voted for him, remember?
Nobody in London voted for Donald Trump. Give me one example of the work he's done that you love, Alex.
People voted for Boris, remember?
Cards on the table, Alex. Cards on the table, Alex. Show me a card.
I'm just not that in tune with American politics to give you a definite answer, but I'm trying to say...
Right, so when you said cards on the table, what you meant was, I don't even know whether I'm playing Snap or poker.
No, I'm trying to say to you, Boris... You have to embrace what he is, and people voted for him, right or wrong. He is a bit of a clown. He's everything you said he is, and I think he orchestrated this leakage. I think a friend of that recorded that. It was all done on purpose and construed to make a lot of media interest and chaos talking about Boris. And remember, when he went on the Marr show talking about Nazanin Zaghari-Ratcliffe, he inadvertently spilled the beans of his MI6, MI5 briefings straight out.
No, he didn't know now. So, you see, not only have you made a complete cretin of yourself, you've also just libelled the Foreign Secretary.
Why not? Everyone else does.
No, mate. You see, cards on the table, Alex. You're a clown.
She might not expect EU leaders to give her a helping hand.
Can you have a shaking hand, please?
But surely she could rely on her Foreign Secretary. Back home, though, Boris Johnson's been secretly recorded, suggesting Theresa May could learn something from the American president.
Imagine Trump doing Brexit. What would he do? He'd go in bloody hard. You know, there'd be all sorts of breakdowns, there'd be all sorts of chaos. Everyone would think he'd gone mad, but actually, you might get something. So it's a very, very good call.
So did the Prime Minister feel undermined by those remarks?
People like Boris have strong views on Brexit, but so do I. I want to deliver Brexit for the British people. That's what people want.
Sir Gerald Howarth joins me, president of the Conservative Way Forward, the group who were hosting the event, former Conservative MP for Aldershot, I should say, who wasn't at the dinner. Good afternoon to you.
Good afternoon, Sheila.
Do you wish you'd been at the dinner now?
Yes, I'd love to have been there because I thoroughly applaud what Boris has been saying, and I think his remarks, whilst I very much regret the fact that somebody betrayed his confidence, nevertheless, I think the result has been that many very despondent and gloomy Brexiteers, people who voted for the United Kingdom to leave the European Union, will have taken heart from the fact that these are the views of the man in charge of our foreign policy. And I think that he's absolutely right in a number of the things he said. And as it happens, I had been speaking to him earlier in the week, and so these views did not come as a surprise to me.
Who do they harm?
I frankly don't think they harm anybody, because everybody knows that this is an issue which divides parties, it divides families, and it is the issue of our times. The people voted by a clear majority, but not a huge majority, but a clear majority, that Britain should leave the European Union. It was never going to be easy after 45 years engaged in this 1950s defunct construct. And so there are bound to be passions on both sides. And I think that in setting out his stall as he's done, he's not only encouraged people in the country who supported Britain's departure from the EU, but I think he'll have sent a very clear message to those negotiating in Brussels that there is likely to be a renewed intent on the part of the British government to negotiate much harder than it has done. And I think from the Prime Minister's point of view, she has explicitly said time after time, Britain is leaving the European Union, we're leaving the customs union, we're leaving the single market. Well, what is emerging from Downing Street on the detail, as we saw yesterday with David Davis, is, well, it's not quite as straightforward as that. And I think it needs to be straightforward. And I think that Boris Johnson has shown the way in which it can be straightforward.
Does Theresa May lack guts?
I don't think she does lack guts.
Well, that's what his comments amount to.
Well, what I do think is that we, as a country, have lacked guts. I'm a Eurosceptic because I was brought up in Germany. I speak some German. I understand the German mentality. I've been watching these negotiations like everybody else. The negotiators on the other side have been crystal clear. They see Britain's departure as a threat to their project to create the United States of Europe. Therefore, they are not in the mood to give us anything like a kind of good deal. This is nothing to do with trade. It has everything to do with politics. We stand in the way. We are likely to frustrate their desire to create this.
Where is Boris Johnson's professionalism in this? You know, he's the Foreign Secretary, she's the Prime Minister. He's taken a coach and horses through her reputation.
Well, that's the way some are interpreting. I'm not interpreting it thus, and indeed, of course...
Donald Trump would do it better. Better than whom? He means better than her.
I don't think he does. I think that he's referring to the negotiators. The Prime Minister is in a difficult position because she is having to balance those in the Cabinet who are in favour of some kind of compromise, in my view, far too much of a compromise, against those like Michael Gove, Boris Johnson and Liam Fox, who take a much more robust attitude, and the Prime Minister has to try and manage those. My view, though, is that having served with her in the House of Commons for many years, having spoken to her about this issue, I do genuinely believe that the Prime Minister is committed to Britain leaving the European Union on the 29th of March next year. The issue is whether she is going to listen to people like her civil servants, in particular the Foreign Office, which of course is the hotbed of cold feet, and has been completely enamoured of this European project from the start. She has got to persuade them and tell them as Prime Minister they've got to stop. We are leaving, and they need to make sure it works. This idea that the whole thing can be held up by some argument about the Irish border, it's nothing to do with the United Kingdom. We don't want a fixed border. There is a border already because there are different taxes on it.
I understand what you're saying. I understand what you're saying. That is clearly the EU having a position on that border as well as the UK having a position on that border. But but you cannot deny that the reality of the Brexit vote opened up that issue. It did. It wasn't Ireland that opened up that issue. It was the referendum vote that opened up that issue.
Yes, but we're a sovereign nation, and thank God we're going to be a properly sovereign nation once again. And we are leaving the European Union.
And we have one hard border with a foreign nation.
The Irish, who were neutral during the Second World War, that upsets the Irish. Tough. You come up with an idea. It is
who were neutral during the Second World War. So it's what, they're cowards. We shouldn't listen to them.
I do not believe that we should be held to ransom by the Irish, and the EU is using the Irish issue nakedly to undermine Britain's position. And Boris Johnson, the Foreign Secretary, was spot on yesterday, night before last rather, when he said that this Irish issue is a question of the tail wagging the dog. I personally believe it is insulting. It's your problem, Ireland. If you don't want a fixed border, fine, but the United Kingdom is leaving the European Union, and if you want to make some arrangements, fine, but you are not going to hold the sixth largest economy in the world, a permanent member of the Security Council of the United Nations, to ransom in order to play the game of the...
Yeah, well, you know, you can say that as much as you like, and you can allude to the Second World War as much as you like, but the reality is that when we leave the European Union, we have one border with a foreign nation. That foreign nation is Ireland. It's a member of the EU, and certain things, whether you like it or not, flow from that, Gerald Howarth.
Well, of course, but Switzerland has a border with the EU. Sweden and Finland have, Norway have borders, Norway has a border with the EU. These are not insuperable problems. Technology is going to come to...
Nobody said they were insuperable, but they're problems, they're issues to be faced, they're things to be agreed upon. But saying we won the war isn't really going to cut it, is it?
Well, I'm not just saying we. I'm making the point. That Britain is a substantial nation, one of only 5 permanent members of the United Nations Security Council. We are the biggest defence players in Europe. And I very much regret that the Prime Minister has thrown away our security card. The Continentals are now telling us that our British companies will be excluded from any defence deals in Europe. It's pathetic. Britain is the major player in defence in Europe. And I do find it, and many of my fellow countrymen find it pretty insulting that, in the words of Margaret Thatcher, nations we either rescued or defeated should now be telling us what to do, standing in our way of fulfilling the express wish of the British people, put to a referendum that Britain will leave the European Union.
Do you see everything through the prism of the Second World War? Do you see everything?
Sorry?
Do you see everything through the prism of the Second World War?
That's an absurdity. I didn't say that.
Well, you've just referred to nations we either defeated or rescued. I'm presuming you were referring to the Second World War.
I am referring to that, but that was an aside.
But Ireland's role in the Second World War, that's dictating your view on the Irish border question. I just wondered whether it's the prism through which you see every political issue.
It's not the prism through which I see every political issue, but I am looking at this in terms of the history. And there is a lot of resentment out there amongst the people I speak to who feel that the British government has not negotiated hard enough. They do find it, they do resent the fact that these other countries are unwilling to deal with us properly. We have made all the concessions all the way through. There have been no concessions made by the other side, and that's the point that Boris Johnson was making.
OK, thank you very much indeed for joining us. Sir Gerald Howarth, President of the Conservative Way Forward. They were the group hosting that event, former Conservative MP for Aldershot. Elizabeth has called from Clacton and Phil in Corby to talk about that photo, really, or that photo as a springboard for a conversation about whether it tells us something fundamental has changed about how the West does politics. Do you think it has, Elizabeth?
Yes, I'd like to congratulate President Trump for sticking up for his beliefs and what he told his people that he was going to do. And the liberal elite are on their way out, thank God. That's why the world is such a mess. They cave into everything.
What have they done wrong, the liberal elite?
Well, look how they get billions to Iran. They haven't got anywhere, really. Now Italy are turning back boats full of migrants. Where are these migrants coming from? Who supplied the boats? But getting back to President Trump, look, he's now in Singapore having a meeting with, another...
He will tomorrow, Kim Jong-un.
Yeah. Well, who has done that? Nobody. Look what he's doing. And all the
he isn't the first American president to be offered the opportunity. He's just the first American president to have accepted the opportunity.
Oh, he's not a fool, and the names people call him in this country is disgraceful. And I hope when he comes here, we don't have any of these old lefties like Owen Jones and Sadiq Khan bad-mouthing President Trump, because I think that would be an absolute disgrace. And no wonder he's being put off Great Britain. USA are our greatest allies.
But are they behaving that way towards us, do you think?
Well, no, if we weren't in the EU, I'm sure that he would be behaving like that towards us. And the EU do not like it one bit. And when we leave, thank God, because we can do our own deals with the USA and the EU can't do anything about it, and they don't like it.
Interestingly, though, when he was asked about his relations with other leaders, he didn't mention Theresa May yesterday.
Well, no, because why should he? She's the wet lettuce. She doesn't stand to people either. She's caved into the EU over everything, and we're really annoyed here in Clacton the way she's betrayed our fishing folk.
And
all the time.
When I talk about the post-war, the kind of post-war settlement that was created in the world after all that horrible loss and destruction, and
I know my father was a prisoner of war in Germany.
Was he? Yeah. I mean, because you know better than most, then, Elizabeth, that that world order wasn't it, Western democracies with America fully behind and monetarily supporting those democracies after the war in many cases, and it feels to me like it's kind of worked. You say it absolutely hasn't worked.
No, I don't. I mean, I've travelled when I was younger. I travelled around Europe, going from East to West Germany. I've been to Berlin, to the war. I've also been to South Africa when the apartheid was on, and that was disgusting. So I've travelled a bit and seen a bit of the world. But at least we stood up for our principles, and what one politician said they're going to do something, they did it. Not our lot that cave in. And
who have we caved into?
Well, we cave into all these political correct lefties and think, you mustn't say this, you mustn't do that.
What are they stopping you from? How are they stopping you from living? I'm genuinely curious.
No, they're not stopping me from living.
No, but what are they stopping people from doing? Because I feel like I live in a very free democracy, and I'm happy to do so.
Well, this is good that we have LBC, because you allow people like me, ordinary British housewife to have our points of view, which is good. But if we go against the old lefties, like the vote coming up tomorrow in Parliament, you see some of these MPs coming up, oh, the world's going to come to an end because he voted to leave the EU. Well, why aren't we getting behind this country and not...
let me give you an example. You keep referring to people as old lefties or lefties. Yeah. Kenneth Clarke couldn't on any planet be described as a lefty, the Conservative MP.
He's another...
Well, he's very pro-European, isn't he? So
it's about time he retired. I mean,
Yeah, but he's not a lefty, is he? So you're lumping a lot of different views under that one banner.
Well, to me, it comes over as complete... As I say, a wet lettuce like Theresa May, she's hopeless as well. We voted to leave the EU, and when that other gentleman... We're leaving? Yeah, but not for another, 3 or 4 years?
Well, it's not clear yet, is it, what's going to happen? That's part of the problem, that it isn't clear. Elizabeth, thank you for your call. Elizabeth in Clacton-on-Sea.
George is in Blackburn. George, what would you like to say?
Morning, James. I'm a first-time caller.
Welcome, George.
I'm one of these Brexit fundamentalists who your other callers are talking about.
So you want to leave even though we're definitely not ready?
Yeah, I mean...
Okay, why is that then?
Because the thing is, we'll never be ready. Negotiations with the EU never agree to anything that we negotiate with. It's like
they haven't changed their position in 23 months.
No, when Cameron went over originally to negotiate, when he was in power and he went over and he did big press conference saying he's going to get this and he's going to get that and he's going to get to that. He came back with nothing to the electorate. No, he did in relation to...
What did he say he was going to get?
Well, he said he was going to sort out things to do with migration and things to do with...
he didn't, though, did he? Because we were already subject to Article 2 of the Citizens' Charter. We could already...
I know, but he tried to negotiate things with them.
With countries that are already in Schengen and the Euro. So David Cameron, and I think we can both agree the man's a clown. Some of us realised it at the time. Some of us, perhaps like you, didn't. You thought that he would be able to pull some sort of rabbit out of the hat. What happened when he went to those negotiations is the countries turned around and said to him, you're not in the Euro and you're not in Schengen. What is this mythical deal you think you can get that would make you even less involved in the European Union while still being in the European Union and having a very, very powerful role in framing its legislation? So park that for a minute, and you're perfectly welcome to ignore the fact that the European Union's negotiating position has been laid out in black and white for the best part of 2 years and hasn't changed 1 inch. You're perfectly entitled to pretend that's not true. Tell me why you're so keen to jump off this cliff without knowing where you're going to land.
Because this is the whole reason I voted Brexit in the first place. I mean, there's obviously this whole argument, or some people voted because they thought 350 million for the NHS, or...
No, you're much cleverer than that, clearly. You never believed any of that stuff. What was your reason?
No, it was none of that. But for me, I saw the EU as and I still see, even 2 years later, I've not changed my opinion on why I voted, because you look at Italy. You've got Italy, Spain, Greece, Hungary, Poland. You've got so many cracks across the EU.
No, George, again, mate. Can you tell me why they've all got higher approval ratings for staying in the European Union than they had when we voted to leave?
I don't believe that. I mean, Italy's just voted in a very anti-EU party over there.
Both sides of it. The Lega. No, George, mate, you need to perhaps extend your reading a little further. Both sides of that coalition, the Lega and the Five Star Movement, yesterday announced they have absolutely no intention of leaving the Eurozone, let alone the European Union. So I'd ask you again, because I know a lot of people...
Not as yet.
A lot of people sell this line. No, not ever. A lot of people sell this line. Look at Italy, look at Portugal, look at Spain. It's become the new, they need us more than we need them, or it's become the new, get back control of our borders. But you know what happens when you pull those threads. They fall apart like a cheap suit. So you need to tell me why support for the European Union in all of the southern European countries that you've just mentioned has gone up exponentially since we voted to leave, and they've had a look at what leaving looks like. Why do you think that is, George?
Probably because they see the bullying tactics that he's been using against...
But the European Union's negotiating position has been laid out in black and white and hasn't shifted at all for 23 months. How is that bullying?
No, I'm just saying that the way Barnier and the way Tusk and Juncker have been acting towards our negotiators.
They've been representing the interests of member states, which we could still be if you want. But again, I mean, it's another word that I understand why you use it, and I could spend 10 minutes listing all the people who've poured this nonsense into your ear. But they laid out their negotiating position pretty much immediately after the result. It's been readable and published for all of that period of time. You can't say that they're bullying. Bullying would involve shifting and moving and changing. They know what they need. You cannot have membership of the single market without the acceptance of the 4 freedoms. So we're back to these 2 questions. Your main reason for voting to leave the EU, according to you, because you were too clever to fall for the lies about the NHS and all of that nonsense. I know. Yeah. So your main reason is, look what's happened in Greece and Italy, Spain and Portugal. And my question then becomes, why do you think all of those countries still have very high support for European Union membership, and it's gone up since we voted to leave? You need to give me a proper answer, George, before we crack on.
I'm trying.
Go on then. Well, try harder, my friend.
Right. Let's look at a country like another sort of United States, as it were. Like you've got European Union with all these member states and everything like that. Let's look at the United States as an example. Right, in the States, you've got 52 states, all of a very similar wage.
George, I'm 3 minutes late for the news. I don't really understand why you're describing America to me.
What I'm trying to say, the European Union doesn't work. So you've got too many.
Okay, then why does everybody else want to stay in it?
Everybody else doesn't want to stay in it.
All right, George, and that's where we part, because now you're fantasising and I'm sharing facts with you. And that's great. Let's shake hands, move on, and I hope your unicorn arrives soon. It's 10:33. Philip is in Sandbach in Cheshire. Philip, is that what happened yesterday?
Hello. Actually, I think you're distorting the whole issue of Brexit. We, the electorate, were asked by MPs for a very clear instruction.
I have been over this quite a few times. Can we confine ourselves to what happened in the House of Commons yesterday?
Yes, I think basically those Conservative MPs who are rebelling are traitors. They are betraying.
But they're just asking for the right to vote on something in the event that it's appalling.
No, not at all.
No, what is it then?
They received a very clear mandate.
No, I appreciate that, but we're talking about what happened yesterday, very, very specifically. Here's what I think, Philip, and then you can pick it apart, okay? But let's deal in the specifics. They have posited the notion, and we will keep it theoretical for the purposes of our conversation. They've posited the notion that the Prime Minister is not going to be able to conjure up anything that isn't demonstrably and considerably inferior to our current arrangements. If that becomes clear, they want the right to say, whoa, stop it. And the government or the parliamentary majority and people like you don't want them to have the right to put the brakes on if it becomes absolutely obvious that we're driving into a brick wall. Now, what's wrong with that analysis, do you think?
Yes, because the alternative they're suggesting would keep us in the EU by the back door.
No, but that's not what happened I'm talking very specifically about what happened in the House of Commons yesterday. They say we must have the right to apply the brake if it becomes absolutely obvious that we're driving into a burning building. And you say, no, even if we're driving into a burning building, we must not have a brake.
Yes, I agree, because...
Yeah, I thought you might, actually. Yes.
If the Prime Minister can't...
You did hear the words that came out of my mouth. I said, if we're driving into a burning building, Philip in Sandbach doesn't want us to not only apply the brake, he doesn't want us to even have a brake.
If Brexit means falling off a cliff edge, so be it.
I salute your honesty, Philip. I salute your honesty.
That's what we voted for.
Absolutely. We voted to fall off a cliff edge and to drive into a burning building.
We did indeed.
No, you're right, we did. Is there any way we can prove that you rang in of your own volition, that you're not an actor, that you haven't been put up to this? Because I'm now going to get bombarded with emails saying... oh, carefully handpicked and filtered from all the cowards who haven't got the guts to ring in themselves. Can we prove that you're real?
Yes.
How?
I'm actually a Brexiteer.
Well, I know that, Philip, because I speak to people like you every day, but other people aren't quite as honest as you are, and they still think that there's an intelligent analysis of the stuff you've just said.
I've stood for UKIP 4 times
there you
as
go.
a candidate.
You see?
I'm an ex-UKIPper.
Bingo. The real deal. What did you vote for? We voted for pain and oblivion. And just talk me through the positives, the things that, when I put on the scales, that we're going to be poorer, that we're not going to be able to trade with the largest single market in the world, that we're going to be damaged. Well, the outgoing head of the CBI says that large parts of the car industry today are going to go extinct if we don't stay in the customs union. So I put all that on the scales on this side, all the measurable materials.
You haven't mentioned immigration.
Exactly that. So you put on the other side the stuff that really makes it all worthwhile. Go.
Immigration is the greatest threat that's faced us since the Second World War.
It is,
mass immigration.
Absolutely.
Mass immigration leads to third world ghettos.
It does, yes.
And that's creating the enemy within.
Right, you are.
That's why.
Yes.
That's why we voted to leave.
It is, yes.
It was a clear
ghettos and the enemy within. Yes.
And
so you're talking about ghettos of continental European people, like sort of Little Venice.
The open door to Europe is also an open door to the rest of the world.
But it isn't, though, is it?
What do you mean it isn't? We've had 20,000 Somalis come to Britain via the Netherlands.
Right. And how many of them are in Sandbach?
Oh, Sandbach is 98% white British.
Well, I suppose.
So my neighbourhood, fortunately, hasn't yet been affected.
No.
But around the southeast,
yes,
what you have essentially are
cesspits.
Third world cultures.
Do you know where? Because I'd quite like to go. I live in the southeast. Do you know where they are?
London is the worst example, obviously.
Well, I'm actually in the middle of London at the moment, and you're in Sandbach, and you're telling me that what I can see out of my own window is what is it, an illusion?
In most London boroughs.
Well, go on, talk me through which ones.
In most London boroughs.
Well, go on, talk me through which ones have you been to?
Like Lambeth, etc.
Lambeth?
Etc.
Where the Archbishop of Canterbury lives?
Whites are actually in a minority.
In a minority?
So in a minority. That's a great threat to social stability and
it is, but you know that the European Union contains no countries that are not majority white.
That's not the point. That's not the point.
What is the point?
The point is where you've got these large immigrant ghettos who are living
like in Lambeth,
within their own culture,
of French people and Italians and Spanish. Moral framework.
We end up with with chaos,
right?
And a lack of social cohesion.
We do a lack of social cohesion. What does cohesion mean, Philip?
It means neighbourhoods coming together and communities coming together.
As long as they're not brown.
Subscribing. I happen to be an East African Asian myself.
Of course you do, Philip. Of course you do. And do you live in a ghetto?
No, I've chosen to live in a town that's 98% white British.
Right, you are. And are you the enemy within?
I'm an assimilationist.
No, can you prove that you're not the enemy within, Philip?
A few of us, James.
Prove it, Philip.
To assimilate.
A few of us have chosen to assimilate. And there you have it. Just for the record, you are 100% real, Philip. And you've rang up entirely of your own volition, and you're not an actor or a stooge or anything like that. You're a 4-time UKIP candidate. Am I right or am I right?
I stood 4 times for UKIP. I'm no longer a member. I'm an ex-UKIPper.
Okay, mate.
4 times for UKIP.
Have a great day. It's 21 minutes after 10.
Hello, I'm Philip Pinto, UKIP's candidate in Milton Keynes South. We are no longer a single-issue party and have a raft of policies from restoring Britishness to transport and welfare. During my campaign, I shall focus on immigration and the housing expansion in our city. For if mass immigration were controlled, there would be no housing shortage. UKIP is the only non-racist, patriotic, anti-immigration party. Thank you for watching, and please consider voting for me.
Now, as you may have seen, cries of shame echoed across the House of Commons today when Sir Christopher Chope derailed attempts to make upskirting a criminal offence. It was thought that the bill, which would outlaw the practice of taking photographs up a person's skirt without their knowledge or permission, would go through unchallenged. Many thought his decision incomprehensible, unfathomable, until they went back to look at his previous voting record on a whole range of issues and private members' bills. We play you out with what has been quietly nicknamed the audacity of Chope. Good night.
Voyeurism Offences Bill, second reading.
No. Objection taken. Second reading. Second reading what then?
It means extra money, significantly more money going into the NHS.
How much?
I'm just about to come on to that. I thought you might want to ask me that question. It means that at the end of 5 years, by 2023-24, there will be £20 billion more in real terms being spent on the NHS. Now, often figures like that, politicians quote figures like that, they don't often mean much to many people. Some people may remember seeing a figure on the side of a bus a while back of 350 million
a week yeah.
In cash. Well, I can tell you that what I'm announcing will mean that in 2023-24, there will be about £600 million a week in cash, more in cash, going into the NHS.
Paul Johnson, he's in central London. He's the director of the Institute for Fiscal Studies. Paul, thanks a lot for joining us. So, is it utter tosh?
Well, I mean, the key thing here is that quite a significant promise of extra funding for the NHS. 20 billion at the end of 5 years means that it's getting back close to its long-run average increase after a very tight 8 years. Where's the money going to come from? That we don't know. One thing we do know is it's not going to come from something called a Brexit dividend.
Well, the Prime Minister says it is.
Well, it can't because there isn't one. I mean, for two reasons. One is a simple bit of arithmetic, which is that if you look through to 2023, because of the way we're paying the Brexit divorce bill and because of the promises the government's already made to farmers and others that will carry on spending money that the EU spends in the UK, there is literally no money. The second and even more important point is that the government has already accepted that because the economy will be hit by Brexit, that there'll be a negative effect on the public finances. There'll actually be at least £15 billion a year less to spend as a result of the Brexit vote. So in the end, this money will come from higher taxes or higher borrowing. There is not a Brexit dividend there for it to be paid with.
Car boot sale dividend. Iain is in Beaconsfield. Iain, what would you like to say?
Oh, James, I tell you what, if I'm a goldfish, that makes you a giant carp, I have to say, because,
Very strong, Iain.
Well, not really, come on. You know, every day you come on and you spout all these words like lies and, and morons and et cetera,
Don't use the word moron, actually. It's very much a word I studiously avoid.
Not far off.
Although I am, if you insist, I am prepared to make an exception in your case, but carry on.
OK, so we give 350 million. You've just gone through all the figures. You know, the net figure's probably 200 million. The remaining 150 million goes to various scientific projects and farming and lots of kickback to people who support the EU and further their agenda. So,
for example?
When we know...
For example?
Well, I just said, like, farming, scientific research and various...
But for example, who gets kickbacks?
Well, people who support the EU, most of the money...
The farming community came out quite strongly against it, despite the advice of the NFU. So who gets the kickbacks that supports the EU?
Well, that's my belief. But
we're not talking about beliefs, are we? We're talking about fact. We are at the point you just made about kickbacks and the EU support. So who are you talking about, Iain?
I think a lot of the money is. But anyway,
but who are you talking about, Iain? Who are you talking about?
Oh, you're doing it again, aren't you? You're not
Yeah,
going to
I know, asking questions and insisting you back up your quotes, beliefs and quotes. But rest assured, I'm not going to call you a moron. So what are you talking about when you describe institutions? Institutions that get kickbacks?
200 million.
Institutions that get kickbacks, Ian.
James, you don't want to make people, express their opinions on your show.
I'm repeating your words back to you. I'm repeating your words back to you and asking you to explain yourself. You can say I can't, and then we'll carry on.
The money that comes back,
yes,
in the past, is kickbacks for people who support the EU.
For example?
Agenda, right? That's just my opinion.
For example?
You can do whatever you like.
For example?
I'm not going to give any examples because I'd like to get to my point.
Okay, don't give me any examples, but carry on. You're definitely not a moron.
That's my opinion. Okay, yeah, you call me what you like. That's your defence mechanism, isn't it?
No, you're definitely not a moron.
And they disagree with you.
You're definitely not. We haven't disagreed yet. You've told me some beliefs, and then we both agreed that you can't back them up. What have we disagreed about?
Right, okay. So we have 350 million at our disposal. Now, if the government at the time decides to continue to fund all those projects, then the net figure will remain at 200 million or thereabouts.
What project?
Or whatever.
What project?
Well, God, James, can I make my point?
Yes, if you just have to back up the words that you use, what projects?
Look, I'm not an expert on what this money funds. I know.
So what are the projects? Just give me one project that you're talking about. One project.
All sorts of stuff. It goes to medical research. It goes to community projects.
So you want to cut medical research?
Sorry?
You want to cut medical research?
No, I didn't say that, did I?
Well, you did. You said if we don't fund these projects, and I said what projects, and you said medical research, and I said so now you don't want to fund medical research.
But I didn't. Yeah, but I'm not saying that at all.
So what are you saying, Ian?
At the time,
what are you saying?
Well, if you let me talk, I can say it.
But I need to clarify so that I can understand what you're saying. You just said that we won't fund these projects. I said what projects? You said medical research.
I didn't say we won't fund them.
You did, mate.
I said. See, this is your tactic, isn't it?
Yes, it is. Repeating back your own words to you and asking you to explain them.
You want me to start again?
Yes.
Right, okay, 350 million, approximately 150 million debatable, comes back in various projects, assorted projects. The government of the day has the option to... Oh, there you go again.
Yes, well, we've started again, so now you can tell me what the projects are.
Oh, James, you are so...
Oh, Ian, come on, mate. It's really easy. Here's the thing, right? If I said, Ian, there's all these projects, and you said, what projects, I would tell you.
Do you think people buy this tactic? Do you think people don't realise what you're doing?
What am I doing, Ian?
Well, you're trying to humiliate and bully your caller.
No, I'm not, Ian. I'm asking you to explain your own words.
Coercing, as far as I'm...
So what projects, mate?
There you go again.
Asking you to explain your own words. When you say, am I going to let you finish, do you mean I'm going to let you talk...
Well, I haven't got to the point yet.
In a way that you can't explain, and I'm not going to challenge you in any way.
Is you continue to...
No, I will do that, actually. I'm just going to be quiet. I'm going to be quiet now, so you fill your boots. Go.
Right, so... 350 minus 150, they have the option to continue all those projects with that money or not to. But if they decide not to, then we have £350 million. It's there. You know, when we leave, it's there, basically. Doesn't matter what the economy does. If we stayed in, they would have to find that money anyway. So that money is then available. So it's not fictitious, it's real. Okay, so we have that money, basically, to choose to invest in the NHS. So it's not fictitious, so that makes you a giant carp if I'm a goldfish. You just spout the same stuff every day. You know, it's not a lie. It absolutely isn't a lie. So there is money available. Now, whether they can cover the whole bill with that 350 million or not is not the point. The point is that we will have an enormous amount of money that at the moment does us no good because it goes off to the EU. Some of it comes back in to support EU-funded projects, which further their agenda, in my opinion, and I'm not going to prove it. And that's the point. It's not fictitious. Over to you. Go on, James.
I'm still listening.
Okay, well, that's my point. So you finally let me make it, but, you know, it's ridiculous. It's painful listening to you sometimes on the show because you're not a professional at all. You don't let people make their points.
Well, you've made your point now.
Okay, well, thank you very much.
So I do let people make their points.
Eventually.
Okay, so now what are the projects that we're not going to pay for anymore?
Confuse them.
Ian, what are the projects that we're not going to pay for anymore?
Yeah, you go again.
Well, could you just tell me now?
Well, some of them are scientific, some of them are community projects.
So but just give me some examples, mate.
Farming, it goes to all sorts of stuff. Well, I don't have to give you examples.
I think well, no, you don't. Of course you don't have to, but if you don't want to sound ridiculous, you do.
No, not at all. I don't sound...
So just one example?
I only sound ridiculous.
Nothing?
Gullible.
Come on.
Follow you and believe...
Iain?
What?
Anything?
What?
Anything?
James, I'm going to go to...
The project? OK, mate. Have a great day. You're definitely not a moron.
Back to the United States now, and despite a chorus of criticism, much of it from his own Republican Party, President Trump has doubled down on his tough new immigration policy, which has seen thousands of children separated from their migrant parents at the border. In a speech in the last hour, Mr. Trump accused the media of helping smugglers and traffickers, and accused asylum seekers of hiring professional lawyers to give them false stories. His opponents say the policy is an affront to the decency of the American people. Fatima Manji has this report.
This is the sound of zero tolerance. Children separated from their parents in a US detention camp. The secret recording was released by a civil rights lawyer to investigative journalists at ProPublica. The distressing sounds of children crying have heightened the backlash already begun in reaction to these disturbing images. More than 2,000 children have been separated from their parents as they attempted to illegally cross into the US. Zero tolerance means the parents are arrested and the children housed in warehouses like this one.
People that come in violate the law, they endanger their children in the process, and frankly, they endanger all of our children.
Mr. Trump has blamed the smugglers, the Democrats and the Mexicans for the situation. He says he's dealing with illegal immigrants trying to infest the country.
Not with me. We're taking them out by the thousands. We're taking them out by the thousands.
The Trump administration has claimed separating children from their parents is merely following the law. Not the case, says this legal expert.
That's an absolute lie. While the law is that they are being held for immigration purposes, they would be with their families. They're using the criminal charges as a means and a method to separate them without giving them all of the protections that the criminal law gives them, including due process, the right to sit down with an attorney and actually discuss their case. So they've taken all of that away and forced them into this particular position.
Steve in Hemel, hello.
Hi there. Hi. I'm not quite sure where we're going with this, but are you trying to imply that Donald Trump is stopping these children being with their parents? Because it's strictly not true. I saw a news programme this morning, about 9 o'clock this morning, with Donald Trump speaking to a news reporter for over half an hour, and at least half of the time he was talking about this problem, and it's being blocked. He's trying to get the children with the adults, and it's being blocked by the Democrats.
You've been watching Fox News?
No, I haven't been watching Fox News.
What was he on?
It doesn't matter what I'm watching. What I'm saying to you.
Well, no, what it does to me, I'm curious because
but why could you don't like Donald Trump? You don't like. It wouldn't matter if Donald Trump gave every person £1 billion in their back pocket. You still wouldn't like him. The fact is, United States is doing brilliantly. He's going to stop a nuclear war in North Korea. The economy is doing great.
Which is great because he nearly started one.
I honestly, why can't I'm able to say good things and bad things about all sorts of politicians. Why can't you actually say that what he's done in North Korea is acceptable?
I have. I had a conversation. I had an hour's worth of conversations with people about North Korea. I won't reiterate it, but I said if he turns out to have denuclearized that peninsula, he has done a great thing.
Yes,
but the if is as big as an if could possibly be.
But you are implying, this is fake news, you are implying that Donald Trump is deliberately keeping these children from these migrant refugee families. Now, it is strictly not true.
Let me finish my sentence, Steve. He's deliberately created a policy within a law that has no provision for that policy. There is no law that requires families to be separated at that border. There is documented. No, there isn't. No, there isn't. There is a law that requires people to be stopped when they are coming across illegally, but there is no law that says tell parents you're taking their kid for a bath and then they don't see them again. That's different.
Hey everybody, it's Jake Tapper from CNN State of the Union and factcheck.org. This week there's been a lot in the news about families of undocumented immigrants coming into the United States and being separated at the border. One report suggesting that the U.S. government lost track of 1,500 children that were part of these families that were separated at the border. So we want to take a look at a charge President Trump made that this problem and this policy is the fault of Democrats. The president made this claim at a roundtable on so-called sanctuary cities last week at the White House. Take a listen.
We have to break up families. The Democrats gave us that law. It's a horrible thing. We have to break up families. The Democrats gave us that law, and they don't want to do anything about it. They'll leave it like that because they don't want to make any changes. And now you're breaking up families because of the Democrats. It's terrible.
Is that true? Did Democrats give us this law that forces the families of undocumented immigrants to be separated at the border? No, that's not true. Before President Trump took office, many of these families were either processed and released as a family with notice to appear before an immigration court, or they were held in family detention centers together, according to the Bipartisan Policy Center. But in May 2018, the Trump administration announced that all families, all individuals caught entering the United States illegally would be referred to federal prosecutors for criminal charges. Now, under that new plan, a Department of Homeland Security spokesperson says the parents would be placed in detention centers while the children would go to separate juvenile facilities or potentially foster care if they did not have an adult relative in the United States who could take them in. So what law that the Democrats gave us is President Trump referring to when he says the Democrats gave us this law that forces families to be separated, children and parents to be separated? Well, we asked the White House and they referred us to a Department of Homeland Security statement. The statement outlines a 1997 legal settlement that says the Department of Homeland Security can hold children for only 20 days pending their immigration cases, as well as a 2008 human trafficking law that says unaccompanied minors from countries other than Mexico and Canada must be placed in the care of the Office of Refugee Resettlement or with relatives in the United States while they go through removal proceedings. So first, that 1997 legal settlement, that's obviously nothing that the Democrats gave us. It's a legal settlement. Now, the 2008 law, that was passed by the Congress by unanimous consent and was signed into law by George W. Bush, who was the president in 2008. And it doesn't require families to be split apart at the border, though it does limit where and how long the government can hold these children. In fact, experts say that the Trump administration's decision to hold the parents for criminal charges instead of releasing them along with their children is ultimately what will result in the separation of even more families. So, to be clear, neither of the legal examples that the White House gave us forces the Trump administration to separate parents from their children when caught at the border. Not at all. And we're still waiting for any evidence that this is a law that the Democrats gave us forcing the Trump administration's hand. As of now, we have no evidence that that's the case. A reminder to all you politicians out there, you're perfectly entitled to your own opinions, but not to your own facts.
Well, unfortunately, your liberal view, with respect, Sheila, I'm sure you're a nice person, but your liberal view, with respect, is it's losing.
It's not, but Steve, I don't have.
It's losing its momentum.
I don't have.
You are liberal.
Well, hang on.
You and James are both very, very liberal.
Can I account for myself rather than you accounting for me? Can I account for myself?
Well, you don't need to. I listen to you every day.
Well, if you listen to me every day, you'll have heard me say that sensible immigration restrictions absolutely are the right of every nation, and those policies should be formed through conversations like this one between you and me and between you and me and politicians. Well, hang on.
I can't.
But I don't think that they should be cruel, and I don't think that they should separate children from parents, and I don't think which we're doing, should leave kids in a detention centre without an education. That's not liberal. That's just sane.
Well, let me just. Why didn't you do a poll? Why didn't you do a poll and suggest two answers?
Is the British public happy with the open door policy we've got in this country, or do they want massive changes and to cut it by at least, 75%? See what happens.
Well, I think we know the answer to that, don't we?
Because if
I think we know, but you're talking about numbers, Steve, and I think we know the answer to that.
Not just the numbers.
I'm talking about treatment. You're talking about numbers. I'm talking about treatment.
Well, most of them shouldn't be here or in America in the first place. And it's the same thing that's happening in Italy.
Most of who?
Most of these migrants and refugees, the West doesn't want. The populations don't want. It's only the liberal elite.
You're not talking about the EU. No, you're not talking
about the EU.
You're talking
about United
Well, the
States,
EU,
Canada.
as things stand, EU migrants have every right to be here as citizens of the EU.
Yeah, illegally, but from my opinion, I think it's been crazy what's happened. I mean, it depends what you do, Sheila. If somebody was allowing East European, very clever news people, sort of reporters like yourself, to go for your job at $60,000 a year as opposed to your salary, you wouldn't like it. But it hasn't happened to you and James O'Brien, has it? The fact is, you don't know how the other half live. You're in a little bubble.
Well, you don't know how I live either, so...
But I listen to you. What I'm saying...
I'm listening to you, but I don't know anything about you.
The world wants change, and we want to stop immigration.
That's fine. Change is fine. Politics is fine. Democracy is fine. Change that I don't like is also fine. Inhumanity and cruelty is not so fine. Thank you, Steve.
Now, President Trump has shown once again that criticism, if anything, makes him all the more determined. Far from retreating on his controversial policy of splitting up families who try to get across the Mexican border without any paperwork, he insisted the only alternative was opening American borders to everyone. More than 2,000 children have been separated from their parents in the past few weeks.
The outrage is only growing. These images of detention facilities where children are being kept in cages, having been separated from their parents, has created a sense among many Americans that this is a defining moment for this country's core values. An audio recording from inside one of those Texas detention camps captures the cries of children calling for their parents and the responses of their guards.
Bueno, aquí tenemos una orquesta. ¿Y tú?
But one man who knows this issue well and who ran the US immigration agency under President Obama says Trump is gravely weakening America.
You can be tough at the border, you can enforce the laws, but you don't need to detain people, and you certainly don't need to rip mothers from or babies from their crying moms' arms in order to do that. But I agree, I'm outraged by this decision, but I guess I'm not shocked.
There is immense, almost unanimous pressure from Congress for Trump to reverse his position on separating families. The Republican Senator John McCain called the White House policy an affront to American decency and contrary to the nation's founding principles and values.
James in Hornchurch. Hello, James.
Hiya. Good afternoon, Sheila. Let's put a few things straight with the last caller. CNN put out a photo saying that children are being kept in cages, and you could see like the cage wire, and you could see them laying on the floor. When you see the picture from another angle, you can see the area they're in is as big as a giant Tesco's. Okay, that's one thing. Second thing is you talk about, it's sadist or whatever. The person you was referring to earlier, Barbara Bush, she wears the Baphomet necklace, okay? She's the daughter of Aleister Crowley, okay? So when we're talking about moral compasses here, I think we need to get our facts straight. Now, Donald Trump is right to do what he's doing because people are irresponsibly leading their children into a dangerous situation in a cynical ploy to get over the border. Now, if they want to put their children in risk, they're willing to do anything to do that. And it's not right. Now, he's drawn a line in the sand and said, listen, you're not going to do this anymore. You're not going to use this ploy to get into the country by trying to pluck on our heartstrings using the children. They're not going to come to any harm, but they're going to be detained so that no one else does it anymore.
Yeah, but if...
Perfectly legitimate.
But if people... I mean, I don't know when you were last in Mexico or how much you know about Mexico, but if those parents are taking their children away from extreme violence and poverty, then
that's the Mexican people's problem.
That's pardon?
The Mexican government's problem. It's not that.
But that's why people claim asylum, James.
In Africa isn't our problem.
But that's why people claim asylum. That's the point of claiming asylum.
There's this thing in the West where every let's say it, white country has to take on people from all over the world because they've got problems. Because we done something 200 years ago. Give me a break. Okay? This is globalisation. This is an infiltration and taking down our sovereignty. This is the end goal, to take our sovereignty away through mass migration so they've got block voting. All right? It's already happening in this country now. You know, and we're not falling for it. We're not going to use people plucking our heartstrings with this to the children.
All right, James, I get.
We know what you're doing.
Well, I'm not doing anything. I'm asking you some questions. I'm just trying to. I'm not tricking you. I've got no power. I'm not tricking you at all.
Liberal media.
I just want to. I'm trying to ask you some questions.
We don't care about children.
I'm trying to ask you some. I'm trying to ask you some questions. I suspect you care very much about your own children. I'm asking you about some other people's children.
Very worried about them, to be honest.
Well, yeah, all right. Just on that question, on that point of if... Let's create a scenario where genuine need exists, a genuine need for asylum exists, right? You accept that sometimes that's the case, do you? That sometimes
that is the case. But
right.
Most of the time, this is chain migration. There's so many little tricks that people pull in, right? I'll tell you what it does. It takes away...
But it doesn't take away our responsibility to be good to children, does it, James? Nothing takes away our responsibility to be good to children, does it?
With all due respect, it takes away the real cases. There are real cases, right? But people are sick to death of being tricked with economic migrants, opportunists coming in, and what they're ruining it for the real people.
Right, I get the point. I get the point. But I can't. Can you see circumstances in which it's okay to be cruel to children? Because I can't.
Come on, don't be. But please don't do that virtue signalling stuff.
I'm not. That is clear.
Straight out of the...
I'm not. Gosh, you're throwing all the buzzwords at me. You're throwing all... I've read the history books too. You're throwing all the buzzwords at me. Chain migration, the liberal media. What was the last one? I can't remember it now. There's so many in that speech from James. James, I get where you're coming from. You have every right to regard these stories the way you regard them. But you didn't answer my question, whether you think it's ever acceptable to be cruel to children. And the answer has to be no, doesn't it? Wherever you stand on immigration, wherever you stand on anything, the answer to that question has to be no.
Tricia is in Bishop Stortford. Tricia, what would you like to say?
Oh, hi there, James. I'm
Hi,
a little bit nervous.
Oh, don't be silly. It's only me.
I know, that's what I'm nervous about, because I know you don't agree with what I'm going to say.
Go on, then.
Okay, I'm going to play the devil's advocate.
No, don't. Just tell me what you think. A devil's advocate means you're pretending to believe something for the sake of a debate. Tell me what you think.
Well, I'm going to play the devil's advocate. That's the way I see it.
So you're not going to tell me what you actually believe, then?
Yeah, I'm going to tell you my perspective.
Yeah,
on
good.
it.
Okay.
If I had a baby and I got in a boat, because I quite fancy going to Australia or New Zealand, and I travelled across various oceans to get there, and then when I arrived, the authorities of that country thought I'd been highly irresponsible and put my child at risk because I'm illegally trying to enter a country. I'm just wondering if that's possibly the way the Americans see it, because at the end of the day, these are people that are illegally trying to enter the country. It's an illegal thing they're trying to do, and they are putting their children at risk by doing it. I travelled extensively.
At risk of what?
Well, because they're putting their children in a very dangerous position.
Why do you think they do it, Tricia?
Well, I would never have believed this myself.
No, why do you think they do it? Why do you think someone...
I'm trying to explain to you. I travelled extensively in India myself. I backpacked around India for a year. And I saw children that were being mercilessly used, sometimes by their parents, sometimes by people that had actually abducted them, to play on the emotions of tourists and various... Honestly, I've seen this myself.
Yes, no, I believe you, but it's not the question I asked you. If you're from...
I'm just saying people mercilessly use their children to get what they want sometimes.
Yes. So if you're living in poverty, in Guatemala and you decide to try to get to America with your family, why do you think you're trying to get to America?
Well, personally, if that was me, if I was living in poverty and I wanted to get to another country, I think I'd send my husband first and I'd keep the children safe.
Yes.
And then if he managed to get passage...
But the husband is the only person that can earn a living, and you're already living in abject poverty.
Do you not put any blame on the parents at all? Do you not?
No, I don't. No, Tricia, I don't use the word blame in the context of a conversation like this. It's the last word I would ever reach for in a billion years. But I respect your right to reach for it first. What is? Do you think the reason why? Tricia, they try to get into America with their families. Why do you think that is? Because you're right, there are risks. But what they've done is weigh up the risks and decide that that is a better chance for their children than staying where they started.
Well, when in 2015...
Just listen to this again, Tricia. Listen again. No. Yes.
I don't know where that... No,
All babies in nappies that have been separated from their mums and dads for 3 or 4 days. Some of them are teenagers with perfect English. So just imagine one of them was here now, and you, using your experiences of backpacking in India, explain to them why they're in that cage.
We were just on holiday and we were talking to some Americans.
You're talking to a teenage Guatemalan now. Go on.
I'm trying to answer the question. We were on holiday. We were talking to some Americans that were Trump supporters, and they were basically saying that many of their friends are having to do 4 jobs because after Obama...
I thought the immigrants took all the jobs.
Well, this is why they're saying they want the borders closed, because they're saying people can't get full-time work.
They've got 4 jobs.
No, they won't give them a full-time job. They've got to do 4 separate jobs.
So
just
explain to that Guatemalan teenager why they're in a cage. Using your experiences of backpacking in India.
I think there's children in this country the Americans are more concerned about. They mentioned the Charlie Gard case, the Alfie Evans case.
Yes, but that's all the alt-right propaganda that's designed to make Americans reject socialised healthcare because they don't want rich people, don't want poor people getting treated. But talk again to that... Tricia, this isn't an argument. Just explain to that, using your experiences of backpacking in India, explain to that Guatemalan teenager why they're locked in a cage with 2,000 4-year-olds.
You don't let people explain unless it's what you want to hear.
No, I want to hear your answer. Charlie Gard has got nothing to do with that Guatemalan teenager.
Because children in this country are treated terribly, and the perception from America is that...
OK, so you're telling a Guatemalan teenager that they're in a cage because people in Britain are treated terribly?
I'm telling the Guatemalan teenager that their parents should not have brought them into a country illegally.
But it's better than where they came from. The risks they've run.
You don't know that.
So why do you think they've done it then, Tricia?
Because there's a globalist agenda. George Soros is funding a lot of it.
Here we are.
To get rid of all the borders. You know that as well as I do.
I know one thing, Tricia, and I honestly, if you had a brain cell, my love, it would die of loneliness. It's 1 minute after 11, you're listening to James O'Brien on LBC, and there it is, you see? That's how it happens. That's how you can listen to that wailing and that weeping and then log on to InfoWars or Breitbart or wherever it is and talk about George Soros.
Conrad's in Cheltenham. Conrad, you're on the radio. Good morning.
Hello, Nick. I'd like to point out that something that no one ever seems to mention, that the cannabis culture, if you'll admit that phrase, which has done so much harm, was actually introduced into this country by the Windrush generation. It was a widespread...
Oh, come on, my friend. Look, hold on. I'm not cutting you off. And undoubtedly, people who come from Windrush and their descendants enjoy... But another massive cause is the hippie culture, and that has nothing to do with Windrush.
The hippie culture corresponded with the arrival of people from
the hippie culture's birth was at Woodstock, over in the United States, and prior to Woodstock in the 60s, with everybody driving around in psychedelic clothing, long hair and beads, and has and I'll allow you, do white people smoke cannabis? Yes. Do mixed race people? Yes. Apparently Sikhs aren't allowed to smoke cannabis. I didn't know that until this morning. And do black people? But you can't say it's wholly down to Windrush, Conrad.
I don't say it's wholly down. Okay. I say it's substantially down. My own father has told me, he was a student in the 1960s. Right. The first black person he ever spoke to, a member of the Windrush generation, was trying to sell as in dope. It was a very widespread thing among young people at the time.
Conrad,
and they were buying
do you think, Conrad, no, well, we'll do it this way, then I'll talk over you. Conrad, do you suppose if the first Roman Catholic priest you ever came across acted inappropriately with you, you would then decide to tar the whole Roman Catholic Church? No, because you're a reasonable man and you would know that that is ludicrous.
If I met a Roman, will you please give me the opportunity to speak?
Well, not if you say things that are deliberately inflammatory, no, because it's my job to make sure that you don't speak. But
I'm
yes,
saying what I believe is true.
Well, that's not actually good enough.
You won't allow anyone to say it.
No, I will, but I'm not going to allow you to write off a whole section of society simply because your dear father, the first black person he met, happened to try and sell him some drugs. No, I'm not going to let that stand.
Did I say I was writing them off? Did I say I was writing them off?
Yeah, you decided that they were mostly responsible for the use of cannabis in this country because of your father's first meeting with a black man. He happened to try to sell him some dope. That's my understanding of what you said.
It wasn't just my father's first meeting. All his friends were smoking it. They were getting it from members of the Windrush generation.
Oh, dear.
It's a particular social evil for which certainly not all members of the Windrush generation are responsible.
I haven't been to Cheltenham in a while.
Spread that.
Yes, I haven't been to Cheltenham.
Religion.
Okay, I haven't been to Cheltenham in a while. Are you relaxed in the company of people who aren't white?
Sometimes.
And sometimes not?
Well, and sometimes I'm not relaxed in the company of people who are white.
Right. But so your relaxation, your level of relaxation has nothing to do with the colour of anyone's skin?
Are you now going to use the magic word racist?
No, I'm asking you a question. Your level of relaxation has nothing to do with the colour of someone's skin, does it?
Nothing whatsoever.
Well, that's pleasing to hear. So do you not think, lastly, that it's a little narrow to base a lot of your views on a certain section of society, or what happened to your dear dad?
It's not...
I mean, the Germans tried to kill my father. I've not decided to take it against Germans.
As a matter of fact, I'm half German.
No, okay.
My grandfather was one of the...
Yeah, well, my dad fought in the war, but I don't think all Germans are out to kill me, and my view of Germans is not coloured by that.
I haven't said that all black people sell dope.
No,
I said nothing of the sort.
No, but you said that they really are one of the key... And of course they use it, but I would say they do. Listen, we're best to respect your father. Conrad, enjoy your weekend. I sense we're going round and round and round and round in circles, so we'll leave it there.
Adam is in Madrid, in Spain. Adam, what would you like to say?
Yeah, hi. Can I quickly say a word about Airbus?
Yeah, of course you can, mate.
Or not? Yeah, well, what they've announced is simply the start of their screw-tightening process that's going to end in a big tax break for them.
OK, Adam.
They won't leave the country. They'll just get better conditions under the threat of doing so. Right.
But what are your qualifications? I mean, I don't mean that to sound... do you work in the sector?
No, I don't, no.
But you have some understanding of international aeronautics?
No, none at all.
What about?
I simply don't think a big country is going to relocate, because it's more expensive to relocate. They're just pressing now for the tax break they think they can get.
And you think... So companies can get individual tax breaks, can they?
Yeah, of course they can.
They don't apply. So corporation tax is negotiable.
Corporation tax isn't, but there are other things. There are trade union waivers that employees have to sign.
That would involve the employees agreeing. It's nothing to do with the government, is it?
Well, it's simply my opinion.
No, and I'm interested in your opinion. As always on this programme, I like to examine the facts that lie behind opinion. So what facts is your opinion based on?
I'm not saying it based on any scientific analysis. I just
or knowledge.
Large companies.
Or knowledge.
Or knowledge.
Okay, well that's fine. So we can park that and crack on. What do you want to say to me about Madrid?
Okay. Right. What Sajid Javid is proposing for EU citizens after Brexit, I think the reaction is a lot of fuss over nothing.
I had a feeling you might. Is it because you already have to apply to live in Spain?
It's much more... What he's proposing for after Brexit sounds like a walk in the park compared to what we have to do.
Are you suggesting that we don't have to leave the European Union, then, to bring in rules like this?
Well, I think it's irrelevant whether we leave.
I want to be clear that I understand you. Are you genuinely telling me that this could all have been done? In fact, he could have gone further without us having to leave the European Union?
Absolutely.
Oh, my goodness. I had absolutely no idea. I thought this was a direct result of Brexit and that we wouldn't have been able to bring in these rules. I mean, certainly reading the Daily Mail, that's the impression I get, unless we'd actually voted to leave the European Union. So he could have even gone further than this under EU laws.
Obviously.
Well, I never. And that is based on knowledge.
That's based on personal experience,
Yes.
knowledge. It happens in
My favourite qualifications. So another reason, another lie about Brexit. So we could have had much more control without having to leave.
We could.
Well, thanks for the call, Adam. That's brilliant. Pardon?
Can I tell you what happens in Spain?
Yeah, of course you can, mate.
Okay, well, they used to have a residence permit, but under EU freedom of movement laws, they can't require you to have a residence permit. So now you simply have to go along to the police and declare your presence, and they give you a number.
And they could have done all this under EU membership?
Of course they could.
Oh, my days.
It's done in Spain, it's done in France.
Unbelievable. All these Brexiters. How did all these Brexiters end up thinking that we had to leave to do stuff like this, do you think?
James, this is all a result of absolutely incompetent bureaucracy in the UK. If we can't handle Windrush people who are British citizens, how can we handle 3 million EU citizens?
Well, you tell me.
Now, having said all that...
Because you said it was a fuss about nothing, and now you're telling us that we're not going to be able to cope.
Well, we won't be able to cope because we can't cope with anything involved.
Well, then it's not a fuss about nothing then, is it? It's a fuss about quite a huge project that you don't think we're going to be able to complete.
I don't think anything will change. People
just as a matter of interest, and we'll part as friends, I promise. Just as a matter, on a scale of 1 to 10, how well do you think this call has gone for you?
Absolutely fine. We're just talking about something. I don't feel...
No, me too. I give you 9.5. It's 11:45.
I know he's a moron.